kill the hearts of the people who were supportive. Wei Yong felt a chill down his spine. Eternal Peace Empire reformed sects and nationalized all the ultimate arts of all schools and sects, founded primary schools, colleges all over the country and Imperial College in the capital city to suppress all the schools and sects in the martial world. They had gathered so many resources. If they still couldn't have any good disciples from their teachings, or their disciples were still inferior to the disciples of all the schools and sects, what would be the point of the Imperial Preceptor's reform? This Daozi of Dao sect must have an extremely strong ability, and must definitely be a genius-level figure, otherwise, he wouldn't be sent by Dao sect to come and give them a slap in the face. The face of Imperial College was Imperial Preceptor's face, the Emperor's face. It was hard to say if Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor and the Emperor's faces could still be maintained. Wei Yong's heart trembled hugely and suddenly he laughed loudly. Imperial College has gathered all the talents in the world, so how will they be no match for an insignificant Daozi of Dao sect? Qin Mu shook his head and thought back how most of these scholars had cultivated the same technique. Therefore he didn't think highly of them. Even though the scholars of Imperial College might have cultivated different techniques, it was hard for them to be specialized. They needed to have directorates that specialized in these techniques to teach, and only then could the scholars learn the essence. From the way he saw it, Dao sect had come prepared this time, and the Imperial scholars could only be blocked on the mountain. If the Imperial scholars of Imperial College couldn't beat this Daozi of Dao sect, the sects in the world have sufficient reason to oppose the Imperial Preceptor. When that time came, the Emperor would lose his virtue and popularity, and all the sects in the world would probably rebel one after another if he didn't execute Imperial Preceptor. The battle between Daozi of Dao sect and Imperial College's scholars would become the battle that concerned the general situation of the world, and couldn't be held in contempt. Let's go and see the ability of this Daozi, Wei Yong said excitedly. Qin Mu and he went down the mountain. There were Imperial scholars everywhere around the mountain gate below the Jade Cliff. The scholars in Imperial College were not a few. Scholars' residence might only take in 10 scholars each year, but there were much more royalties from Royalties Park and Divine Arts practitioners. Qin Mu stood on top of the Jade Cliff and looked up and down, and then he saw two Taoists sitting in front of the mountain gate as expected. One of them was an elder and had a loud ancient look that didn't look like a people of the modern times and looked like he had come from the past. He wore a gray Taoist robe and had a simple bearing. He gave off a presence that was above worldly matter, and sat there like everything in this world had no relation to him. With this presence, he mustn't be an ordinary folk. This elder should be a figure with an extremely high position in the number 1 orthodox sect, which was called Dao sect. And beside the elder was a youth with pretty features. This youth had a snow-white horsetail whisk with a vermilion handle on the crook of his elbow. His clothes were green, and he sat there quietly, seeming not to be affected at all by the Imperial College's scholars surrounding him. Qin Mu exclaimed to himself. This young and the old looked like Taoists who had cultivated their bodies and nurtured their characters, having the bearings that had transcended the mortal world. The two Taoists sat in the middle of the road in front of the mountain gate. The mountain gate was very wide and they didn't take up much space. However, if they didn't chase these two people away, it would be a great shame and humiliation. Blocking the gate was uncommon in the martial world. People would only do it to their greatly hated enemy to let everyone in the world know that the gate of this sect was blocked by them, and to give a slap on the sect's face, destroying the confidence of this sect and belittling their techniques to nothing. Normally when this happened, it would not be settled without killing. Now the young and the old of Dao sect had blocked the gate. They were actually disgracing Eternal Peace Empire, giving a slap on the face of Imperial Preceptor, and trying to destroy the reform of Imperial Preceptor that was rolling full steam ahead. Not far away from Qin Mu, a prince in yellow robe said in a low voice, Dao sect was the biggest sect in the past, which was on par with Heavenly Devil Cult. However, they have laid low these few years along with Heavenly Devil Cult, and no news could be heard from Dao sect. Now that Dao sect has resurfaced again, what they are doing is no small matter. If Imperial College is unable to defeat these two people, Dao sect would probably rebel after these two people go back. If Dao sect rebelled with their influence, Qin Mu looked towards the prince and thought to himself, this person has extraordinary knowledge and experience. That prince suddenly had a feeling in his heart and turned back to look at him. His eyes lighted up. He secretly left the other princes and squeezed his way to Qin Mu, the one that herds cows. The prince had some baby fat on his face as he gave a smile, asking softly, "Did you really come to the capital city to see me?" Qin Mu sized him up and saw that this prince looked familiar, thus he cried out, "You are chubby fatty seventh young master." Immediately after saying this, he instantly came to a realization. Wasn't that chubby fatty seventh young master Ling Yuxiu who was cross-dressing? The prince heard what he said and flew into an uncontrollable fury. She took down a huge iron hammer and was going to smash Qin Mu. Qin Mu immediately corrected himself and smiled. "Good sister, I almost didn't recognize you. Brother Wei, this is 7th Princess Ling Yuxiu. Sister Yuxiu, this is Wei Yong from Duke's Manor." It wasn't good for Ling Yuxiu to smash him to death in public, so she placed her huge iron hammer back. Wei Yong was shocked and he muttered to himself, "7th Princess? Where did Brother Qin bring the 7th Princess over to fool around with? Could a lady of royalty be messed around with?" Head will roll. I've heard this 7th Princess has outstanding talent and knowledge, and is also very ambitious. However, why is her weapon also such boorish and unruly? Qin Mu didn't know what he was thinking and sized up Ling Yuxiu. He found this girl becoming more and more beautiful. Even though she was dressed in male clothing, she had a flourishing heroic spirit and an extraordinary presence. Furthermore, even though she was wearing male clothing, she didn't cover up the fact that her chest was also bulging out like the other women and looked chubby too. Back then in Great Ruins, her chest wasn't so chubby. Qin Mu also smelled a familiar scent on her body, which should be the fragrance of nature incense silk. "Sister, I haven't seen you in a while and your appearance has changed. I almost didn't recognize you back in the palace." Ling Yuxiu's gaze changed and she became slightly shy. "How have I changed?" Qin Mu stretched his hand out and gestured around her head, saying honestly, "You're much taller than before and even taller than me now. You're prettier and much more muscular than before. The muscles on your face and chest." Ling Yuxiu went into a fury and kicked him down the cliff. Qin Mu looked very innocent while he said resentfully in midair, "I didn't say that she was fat. Why did she get so angry?" Hu Linger rejoiced in her misfortune and said, "That's right, young master, this woman is being unreasonable. Let's not bother with her." Thump! Both of Qin Mu's feet landed on the ground steadily and looked back up. He wanted to jump up again, but he was worried that Ling Yuxiu would kick him down. Wei Yong, who had been beside Qin Mu, looked forward motionlessly. Ling Yuxiu stared at him ruthlessly. A drop of cold sweat came out from Wei Yong's forehead before he leaped up and jumped down from the jade cliff. Ling Yuxiu gave a humph and also jumped down the cliff. Not far away, a prince frowned and the vital qi behind his head turned into a huge hand which grabbed down towards the cliff and caught her back. He talked to her gently. "7th sister, don't fool around. You need to take note of the face of the imperial household." Ling Yuxiu could only behave herself and said, "Second brother, that person you just saw is the divine physician that has cured Grandma Empress Dowager. He is my acquaintance." The second prince had an indifferent expression and replied, "I know. I heard from little General Qin before that you met him in Great Ruins and you were very close. 7th sister, we are the children of the imperial household and we can't do whatever we want, so don't fool around. Now that the world is in chaos, a great calamity is right in front of us. If this calamity bursts forth, our empire would be in ruins and our imperial household would become stray dogs." Ling Yuxiu jumped in shock and asked, "Second brother, how do you see this Daozi's ability?" "He has yet made a move, so I do not know his information. But since Dao Sect dared to bring him to block the gate, in that case, his ability would definitely be nothing weak." The second prince looked at Qin Mu, who was below the cliff, and slightly frowned. "7th sister, that one called Qin Mu may be a divine physician of the generation, but he is still an abandoned person after all. Don't be too close to him, otherwise, people would laugh at our imperial family for not knowing our position." Ling Yuxiu frowned. In front of the mountain gate, Devil Cult Patriarch, who had the appearance of a youth, walked down the mountain and stood in front of the young and the old of Dao Sect, bowing down his head in a greeting. The old Daoist immediately stood up with the little Daoist and returned a greeting. The young Patriarch smiled. "Dan Yangzi, what's your intention to bring Daozi of Dao Sect over?" The old Daoist smiled and replied, "Dao brother, why do you ask me as if you did not know? Our Dao master of Dao Sect is already old like you. and doesn't want to see all the sects in the world become Eternal Peace Empire's vassals, so I've come forward. Daozi would only block the gate for 3 days, and if anyone defeats Daozi within 3 days, our Dao sect would not rebel. If no one defeats Daozi in 3 days, the world would have a new ruler. The young patriarch sighed. Dao sect has always been detached from the world, and now even your Dao sect gets antsy too? Dan Yongzi looked down at his heart and said, Dao Master has seen the general situation of the world surging like the tide. The ones who go along with it will prosper while those that go against it would die. Our Dao sect doesn't seek to expand our sect, and only seeks for a clear conscience. Imperial Preceptor wants to wipe out all the sects in the world, so let him be. But Dao Master would like to see if the primary schools, colleges and Imperial College that Imperial Preceptor had implemented to replace sects have that qualifications or not. Daozi is taught by our Dao sect. The resources that Imperial College has occupied surpass those of Dao sect. If the scholars taught by you are still inferior to our Daozi of Dao sect, then there's no need for Imperial Preceptor's reform to exist, and the world will have a new ruler. I understand. The young patriarch turned to leave, and his voice traveled throughout the entire mountain. Imperial College's scholars hear my command. It doesn't matter whether your cultivation is high or low. You can all come down the mountain to challenge him. When he spoke this out, all the people on the mountain heard him. I'll do it. A divine arts practitioner walked out of the mountain gate and strode to Daozi of Dao sect. The Daozi of Dao sect rose and greeted, Senior brother. That divine arts practitioner was also an imperial scholar who had entered Imperial College a few years earlier. He bowed in return and asked, What's Daozi's cultivation? That Daozi replied, Not too fast nor too slow. 6 Directions Realm. That divine arts practitioner smiled. I'm also of the 6 Directions Realm. My surname is Chu and my name is Ping. Today I'm fighting you not because of a personal grudge, but to uphold the name of Imperial College. That Daozi nodded his head and said, My vernacular name is Lin Xian. Senior brother, please. Daozi Lin Xian, please. Radiance shot forth from Chu Ping's eyes as he suddenly moved. His body didn't rush forward but moved backward instead. As he floated backward, there was a sword pellet clutched between his 2 fingers. The sword pellet hummed and shot a brilliant sword chi that was as thick as a pillar. It could faintly be seen that this sword pillar was formed by countless of sword lights gathering together, revolving frantically around the center of the circle. Chu Ping used sword pillar as his sword and cleaved downwards. Everywhere it passed, sword wind would whistle with its majestic grandeur. Qin Mu looked at this situation and couldn't help being astonished. Eternal Peace Empire sword techniques have come to such a degree? Is this a profound sword skill in Imperial College? With his sharp eyes, he could see that this cleaving was no laughing matter. Chu Ping's cleaving might look simple, but in actual fact, his vital qi control on his sword has reached an unimaginable realm. His cleaving might look simple, but in actual fact, the countless of sword lights in that sword pillar all required vital qi to control them. Just this alone made Qin Mu feel he was far inferior. This sword skill seemed to indistinctly exceed the basic techniques of sword movement like stab, flick, cleave, hack, and had developed into another sword skill that was not included in the basic sword skills. Great 6 Directions sword skill. Wei Yong cried out in astonishment, his eyes turning snow-bright. This is Imperial Preceptor's sword skill and is a divine art that only divine arts practitioners can cultivate. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's sword skill? Qin Mu's heart shook violently. It's no wonder he felt that this kind of sword skill had exceeded the boundaries of basic sword arts. He didn't expect that it was a sword skill that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had created. It was no small matter exceeding the boundaries of basic sword skills. It was nearly an impossible task. Qin Mu knew very well the difficulties in it. No matter how complicated, changeable, or innovative they are, all the sword skills in the world could be broken down into the most basic movements of sword skills, which were none other than stab sword form, flick sword form, wave sword form, cleave sword form, hack sword form, poke sword form, jab sword form, parry sword form, curve sword form, smear sword form, sweep sword form, raise sword form, intercept sword form, and shave sword form. No matter how astonishing the sword skills were, they were all the combinations of these sword forms. However, it was different for Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. He had added new basic sword techniques among these most basic sword techniques. How terrifying was that? Qin Mu didn't know how many basic sword techniques he had added, but even if it was one, all the other sword skills would have to be rewritten and reconstructed, otherwise, they would just be full of loopholes in Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's eyes. He could be called God. Qin Mu suppressed the shock in his heart and muttered. The Great Six Directions sword skill that Chu Ping executed was simply impressive and majestic. It had an extremely strong and ferocious power that was unimaginable powerful. The few divine arts practitioners in the Six Directions realm which Qin Mu had seen in great ruins were not as terrifying as this Chu Ping. They were all scholars of Imperial College, but comparing with Five Elements realm, Six Directions realm was a huge leap. The increase was astonishing. Even though the scholars of Five Elements realm were also very strong, they stayed within what was considered reasonable. In Qin Mu's eyes, there were no scholars in the entire Imperial College that could be Chu Ping's match. However, the divine arts practitioners of Imperial College, even if they had just been promoted to Six Directions realm, were still unimaginably strong. Six Directions realm was simply a world-flipping transformation. Qin Mu's thought was interrupted when suddenly the horsetail whisk on the crook of Daozi Lin Xian's elbow floated up. The hairs of the horsetail whisk suddenly expanded and the hairs gathered together to stab towards Chu Ping's Great Six Directions sword. Chu Ping's Great Six Directions sword wasn't included in the basic sword techniques. Daozi Lin Xian took his horsetail whisk as a sword. The moves of his sword skills were clear, and they were all within the techniques of the basic sword techniques. His sword skill was not as impressive and majestic as Great Six Directions sword skill, but in Qin Mu's eyes, he could see the points that were different from usual. Chu Ping will surely lose. Daozi Lin Xian only needs one move to defeat him. Learning sword from village chief, even though he only knew one move sword treading mountains and rivers and the others he knew were all the most basic sword techniques, his eyesight had already surpassed countless of sword skill professionals. Daozi Lin Xian's sword move might look simple, like it was just stabbing towards Chu Ping's Great Six Directions sword skill. However, those hairs were like fine swords that were ever-changing. The changes in the move were simply too much. Qin Mu opened his green heaven's eyes and his heart trembled hugely. In the hundred of hairs in Daozi Lin Xian's horsetail whisk, every hair had changed its move over 10 times in an instant, which was to say his move had changed over 1,000 times in that second. It was impossible to block such a move which could change multiple times. Meanwhile, there were not as many changes in Chu Ping's Great Six Directions sword skill. There might be much more sword lights in this sword pillar, but they all used a twisting sword form, spinning around the center and moving forward layer by layer. When they met the hairs that were used by Daozi Lin Xian as swords, they will definitely be destroyed. Furthermore, Qin Mu also noticed that Daozi Lin Xian's fundamentals were so solid, almost close to his. This Daozi Lin Xian's attainment on basic sword skills was the strongest among the divine arts practitioners Qin Mu had met so far. Even though Daozi Lin Xian was still inferior to him, he wasn't too much inferior. Even if it was Sword Hall Master who had been imparted by Qin Mu, he was also inferior to Daozi Lin Xian. The most crucial point was that even though Chu Ping's sword skills had the new basic sword techniques that Imperial Preceptor had founded, his fundamentals had not reached the uppermost realm and his foundation wasn't solid. No matter how intricate the sword skill was, the power would be unable to be completely unleashed without a solid foundation. Ding 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 ding. Countless of collision sounds traveled out and everyone could only see the hairs clashing with the brilliant sword pillar. Next, they saw the sword pillar disintegrating in the sky and no longer existed. Only a few people could see the changes in their sword skills in that instant. Chu Ping got stabbed in the chest by the horsetail whisk and smacked onto the mountain gate with a thump. The mountain gate moved back and forth and a layer of dust fell off. Daozi Lin Xian gently shook his horsetail whisk and the hairs grew shorter and shorter. With the horsetail whisk leaning back on the crook of his elbow, he sat back down with his eyes looking downwards, calm and composed. On the mountain gate, Chu Ping slid down and there were bloody holes in his chest which were penetrated by the hairs. That Daozi Lin Xian didn't attack mercilessly, as the hairs penetrating his body had avoided his vital organs and didn't endanger his life. The few imperial physicians from the Imperial Physician Bureau immediately rushed over and fed Chu Ping some spirit pills. They then ripped his shirt and smeared ointment on his chest and his back, blocking the bloody holes. So strong! Before the mountain gate, the hearts of many scholars of Imperial College sank. The reputation of Chu Ping among the scholars of the divine arts realm wasn't low. On the contrary, he was someone who was ranked highly in the divine arts residence. Imperial College not only had an entrance examination, there was also a big examination for the scholars every year, which was used to determine the rankings of the scholars to motivate scholars to seek improvement. Chu Ping was ranked within the first 100 ranking among the divine arts practitioners in Imperial College. For people ranked within the first 100 ranking, there wasn't much of a difference in power among one another. Chu Ping was defeated in one move, and it meant that there was still a great difference between Chu Ping's ability and Daozi Lin Xian's ability. This was the most terrifying. Suddenly the second prince's voice sounded in the ears of everyone who was there. Those that couldn't see the changes of both their sword moves better not to go forward. This sentence was a terrible blow to the imperial scholars. Many of them who were present couldn't see the changes in Chu Ping's and Daozi Lin Xian's moves. Especially so for Lin Xian's sword skill. As the Daozi of Dao sect, his sword skill was deeply hidden in the changes of the hairs of the horsetail whisk. If they couldn't even see the changes of his sword skills, they were just asking to be embarrassed if they went forward. Beside Chen Wanyun, Yun Ke asked softly, "Big brother, did you see the changes in that Daozi sword skills?" Yu Qinghong also immediately came forward, wanting to ask Chen Wanyun's opinion. Chen Wanyun hesitated for a moment and said, "I used my sky eyes to see the changes in his moves, but I can't break it down." Yu Qinghong burst out laughing. "Big brother, if you go forward, that little Taoist would definitely seal his 6 directions divine treasure to fight you. His cultivation is mostly in his 6 directions divine treasure. Without his 6 directions divine treasure, he won't be able to execute such intricate sword techniques." Chen Wanyun hesitated for a moment and shook his head. "I need to wait a while more, to see if I can see any loophole. That Qin Mu is not far away. Let us go over and ask for his opinion." The 3 of them came to where Qin Mu was, and Chen Wanyun asked, "Junior brother Qin, do you think you can win this Daozi of Dao sect?" Qin Mu hesitated for a moment and replied, "If we were to fight in front of the mountain gate and he sealed his 6 directions divine treasure, the chances of victory would be 50-50. "Braggart!" Yu Qinghong sneered. "Big boaster! If you and he are 50-50, aren't you saying you are much stronger than divine arts practitioners of 6 directions realm?" Hu Linger pointed at this woman with an expression of astonishment as she muttered, "Young master, this girl is the one who was back to back with you and got smashed into the brass pillar. I've seen her face before." Yu Qinghong's face turned red from shame. This fox was too horrible. Chen Wanyun's gaze flickered and he asked, "What if it was not an open battle in front of the mountain gate? What will be junior brother's chances of victory?" Qin Mu said calmly, 100%. "I'll resort to unscrupulous means in life and death battles, therefore, he has no chance of victory. Actually, I'm very strong." Chen Wanyun's heart suddenly leaped and he raised his eyebrows, secretly counting his chances of victory if he ever met Qin Mu in a life and death battle. Yun Ke smiled. "Junior brother Qin, isn't your tone a little too haughty? Young master, this monk is the one who got knocked out by you with one punch." Hu Linger pointed at Yun Ke and cried out in surprise, "This is the bald head. I remember this bald head. Monk, your clothes still with young master. How much are you planning to spend to redeem it back?" Yun Ke's smile froze on his face and he replied resentfully, "Money is a mere worldly possession to a monk. I don't have any now. When I have the money, I'll go to redeem." After saying so much, "You're still a poor monk." Hu Linger had little interest in him and said, "You need to be faster or else young master will take your clothes to pawn." As she said that, another divine arts practitioner came out from the mountain gate. This person had an imposing appearance and looked impressive. He went forward to greet the 2 Taoists who were blocking the gate and said, "Might inspiring military officer Kuan Ziyu, may I invite Daozi to condescend to teach? I have the 7 stars realm, so I'll seal my 7 stars divine treasure." Daozi rose and returned the greeting. "Senior brother Kuan, please." Chen Wanyun's eyes instantly lighted up and said, "Might inspiring military officer Kuan Ziyu? He's back from the borders." Wei Yong immediately asked, "Big brother, how's the ability of this Kuan Ziyu?" Chen Wanyun didn't reply and Yu Qinghong beside him said, "We imperial scholars are all 8 ranking officials while might inspiring military officer is a 6th ranking official. The sixth-ranking official of senior brother Kuan was gotten from fighting at the borders. So you can imagine how strong he is. In the last Divine Arts Practitioner's big examination, his was ranked in the first 10 of Imperial College. Wei Yong felt deep veneration for him. People being able to fight on the battlefield and obtain achievement to rise to 6th ranking are all remarkable. Qin Mu had not much understanding regarding this and inquired them about it. Chan Wanyun said, "Every year the Imperial scholars will have to leave the mountain for training, accompanied by a directorate. Most of them go to the borders while there are some that go to Great Ruins or Heaven's Craft Bureau. If they render meritorious services, they would be promoted to the nobility. There are many scholars in Imperial College that are 6th-ranking officials, and some are even of the 5th ranking." Qin Mu sighed in admiration. Eternal Peace Empire was trying to groom their officials. Once the Imperial scholars graduated from Imperial College, they would be assigned directly to local official positions or even to the army. Kuan Ziyu had an astonishing power, and even when he sealed his own 7 stars divine treasures, his strength still surpassed Chu Ping. Comparing to Chu Ping, his abilities were more suitable for battle as he executed his spells while controlling his sword at the same time. His sword didn't rigidly adhere to the moves and could change accordingly to situations. He and Dao Zilin Xian actually fought all the way to the sky and clashed in midair. The sword lights in the sky flashed around like lightning with thunderclaps accompanying it. As the lightning struck towards Dao Zilin Xian, Kuan Ziyu moved in for close combat. His momentum was like sprinting thunder. It seemed that he had also cultivated an extremely strong battle technique as well. This battle was brilliant and varied, dazzling the eyes of the crowd below and making them exclaimed in admiration. Qin Mu frowned and asked Chan Wanyun, "Big brother, the technique of Dao sect is not ordinary. What's the origin of it?" Chan Wanyun shook his head only to hear a heavy voice from behind. "Dao sect's classics, pre-celestial supreme mystery technique. The orthodox profound technique that's equally famous to heavenly devil cult's great educational heavenly devil scriptures. Kuan Ziyu is probably going to lose." Qin Mu turned his head back and saw the prince standing beside Ling Yuxiu just now had somehow gotten behind him. He seemed to be Ling Yuxiu's second brother, and his expression was like still water as he looked at the battle in midair. Ling Yuxiu also followed him down the jade cliff and stood behind the second prince. The instant Qin Mu turned his head back, Kuan Ziyu fell off from the sky and crashed into the ground. When he entered close combat with Dao Zilin Xian, the moment their palm strength had clashed, his vital chi was crumbled by the opponent using pre-celestial supreme mystery technique, and his move was dispelled, thus he fell from the sky. The corners of Chan Wanyun's eyes twitched and his heart turned ice cold. I'm probably not his opponent. His battle prowess is too strong. Even if he sealed his other divine treasures and remained at 5 elements realm, it would be difficult for me to win him. No, the more he reveals, there will be more possibilities for me to see his weakness. I'll continue observing him for a period of time, and I just might find his weakness. Pre-celestial supreme mystery technique. This was Qin Mu's first time seeing a technique that was equally matched with Overlord Body 3 elixir technique. The technique that this Dao Zilin Xian had executed was extremely powerful. His cultivation wasn't as dense as Qin Mu's on the same realm, but his vital chi's quality was extremely high and far surpassed his peers. It was because Qin Mu saw Dao Zilin Xian's vital chi was so pure that it was hard to believe, therefore he had asked. Great educational heavenly devil scriptures was called the classics, which could turn one into god or into devil. So for Dao sect's pre-celestial supreme mystery technique to be equally famous as great educational heavenly devil scriptures, it showed how extraordinary it was. Dao sect and heavenly devil cult, one righteous and one devil. They were the 2 sacred grounds of the righteous path and the devil path. If they included Great Thunderclap Monastery of Buddhism, there would be 3 biggest sacred grounds. Other than these 3 big factions, there were also some hidden sacred grounds without prominent reputations that would come out from time to time. Now that Daozi of Dao sect has appeared, I wonder if Great Thunderclap Monastery would come and block the gate as well to ruthlessly smack Imperial Preceptor in the face? Qin Mu thought to himself. The second prince took in a deep breath and walked towards the mountain gate. Ling Yuxiu immediately asked, "Second brother, what are you going out for?" "I'm also an imperial scholar and also a royalty. How can I not battle?" Radiance shot out from second prince's eyes. Our Ling family had fought our way to become the emperor and didn't rely on the civil and military officials to offer it to us. His voice was powerful and resounding, making Qin Mu can't help exclaiming in admiration. This was then a prince. The Ling family being able to become the emperor and turn into the imperial family that was set up high was indeed not by chance. Imperial scholar Ling Yushu. Invite Daozi to exchange teaching. The second prince walked to the front of Daozi Lin Xian and bowed as a greeting. He raised his head and asked solemnly, "Does Daozi need to take a break to recover your vital qi?" Daozi Lin Xian nodded and said, "May I ask senior brother Ling to wait a moment?" Qin Mu clapped his hands and exclaimed in admiration, "If it was me, I would also take a break." That Daozi heard these words and looked towards the source of the voice from the mountain gate. His gaze landed on Qin Mu's face, and when he saw Qin Mu's eyes, his heart shivered. Qin Mu gave a smile in return, and Daozi Lin Xian also gave a smile, nodding his head. He told the old Taoist beside him, "Senior Uncle Dan Yongzi, I saw a very powerful person. His eyes have 2 more layers of pupil than normal people, and he seems to be able to see through my real situation." Dan Yongzi had an indifferent expression. "Heart like still water, to remain unmoved, don't mess up your own pace." Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor is called the number 1 man below gods, therefore, there would naturally be some powerful people in Imperial College. Daozi Lin Xian continued to adjust his condition and recover his cultivation. He executed his pre-celestial supreme mystery technique, and a tiny spirit embryo actually floated out from the heart of his brows, sitting in front of him. Under the spirit embryo was a mysterious altar. This spirit embryo breathed in and out, and 5 Orioles appeared in front and behind it, attracting over the intense star energy from the starry sky. 5 devils and gods faintly appeared under the Orioles and looked extremely terrifying. These were the visions formed by 5 elements divine treasure. After the 5 Orioles had appeared, 6 circular wheels surrounded him, and the visions of 6 directions divine treasure appeared. Qin Mu squinted his eyes. Pre-celestial supreme mystery technique was indeed out of the ordinary. The technique of this Daozi Lin Xian was different from others, but it was much more authentic and impressive. The degree of complexity of this technique was no less than Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique. Dao sect being the number 1 sect of the righteous path sure is outstanding. When Daozi Lin Xian had finished recuperating, he stood up and bowed towards the second prince as a greeting. Ling Yushu returned his greeting, and when he stood up, his vital qi suddenly burst forth like the roars of dragons and tigers. In that instant, almost everyone in front of the mountain gate felt a dragon's might bursting forth from this prince's body. Second Prince Ling Yushu moved, and his body was like swimming dragon. His 5 fingers splayed out like 5 dragons, and 5 exceptionally fierce dragon qi soared out and changed in midair, pouncing towards Daozi Lin Xian. 5 dragons strangle. Ling Yushu's 5 fingers dunked downwards, and the 5 dragon qi shrouded Daozi Lin Xian. The dragons' bodies coiled around Daozi Lin Xian's body, and the 5 dragons strangled him while opening their mouths to spew blazing true fire towards this youth. His speed was extremely fast, and at the instant where the 5 dragons pounced, his body had already reached Daozi Lin Xian's side, and he trembled his hand to gather qi as sword. With the dragon coiling around the sword, he thrust it into the 5 dragons' trap. Inside the 5 dragons' trap, Daozi Lin Xian was bathed all over by that blazing true fire, but his body instead revealed a jade-like glow. The 5 dragons' true fire actually couldn't damage him. The second prince thrust his sword into the 5 dragons' trap, and Daozi Lin Xian raised his horsetail whisk to welcome it, wrapping itself around the dragon's sword. The second prince stomped the ground, and the ground trembled as huge dragons broke through the earth and pounced towards Daozi Lin Xian from below. Daozi Lin Xian used one palm to break open the 5 dragons' trap and rose into the sky. The strands of hair swept by like swords and sliced off the huge dragons' heads, avoiding the sword lights that were shooting down. Spell School. Qin Mu was astonished. The second prince's series of attacks were all the fighting method of the spell school, but they were as fierce and overbearing as the battle technique school, which was abnormally sharp. To be able to execute spells in such a powerful and overbearing way, he really is an unusual one. It was still Qin Mu's first time seeing this kind of fighting method. "Sister, your imperial family's technique is pretty powerful," Qin Mu told Ling Yuxiu. Ling Yuxiu was very proud. "That's for sure. My second brother cultivates the 9 Dragons Monarch technique, which is not any weaker than Dao Sec's Pre-Celestial Supreme Mystery technique. My second brother is someone who has an official position, the 5th-ranking general of Roman cavalry. The second prince rose into the air and 2 dragon chi formed into the shapes of dragons under his feet. Squirming their bodies, they sprinted in the air towards Daozi Lin Xian. His skill was so exquisite that it made everyone gasp in amazement. This wasn't surprising since Imperial College itself was built on the center where 9 dragons' veins had gathered, resulting in the 9 dragons' chi to be incomparably dense. Adding that the second prince was a person of the imperial family, he borrowed the dragon chi to cultivate in itself. Imperial College may be the sacred ground to others, but to him, it was the sacred ground of sacred grounds. By absorbing the dragon chi, he could cultivate twice as fast. His vital chi was vigorous, and there didn't seem to have any depletion in vital chi after executing such an overbearing spell. This was what 9 Dragons Monarch technique was good at. Qin Mu looked for a moment and said, "Sister, your second brother is going to lose." Ling Yuxiu's heart trembled slightly, and suddenly the duel in midair had already ended. Second Prince Ling Yuxiu had received Daozi Lin Xian's counterattack. Daozi Lin Xian executed spells to fight against spells, and the power of the spells from Dao Sec's divine arts was no weaker than 9 Dragons Monarch technique. At the same time, the horsetail whisk flew out from Daozi Lin Xian's hand, and the strands of hair suddenly expanded and turned into fine swords which revolved and sliced frantically at Ling Yuxiu. Ling Yuxiu used his dragon sword to defend, but it was impossible for him to defend against so many fine swords. In the blink of an eye, he was wounded several times and had no other choice but to land on the ground to admit defeat. Ling Yuxiu's defeat gave a huge shock to Imperial College. He was the second prince of the imperial family after all. His own ability was outstanding, and with Imperial College and the imperial family meticulously grooming him, Ling Yuxiu was one of the very best in Imperial College. Now that even he was defeated by Daozi Lin Xian, there was nearly no one in Imperial College who could be a match for this Daozi. Yu Qinghong looked at Qin Mu. "Hey 50-50, our Imperial College is already getting blocked, so why aren't you going up?" Qin Mu was bewildered. "Why do I have to go up?" Yu Qinghong snorted and tried to taunt him. "Didn't you say if you fight this Daozi your chances of victory would be 50-50? Qin Mu shook his head. "I had just become an Imperial scholar and only listened to a lesson in Hall of Hidden Light. So what's the point if I win when I haven't even learned any martial arts from Imperial College? It wouldn't be considered as Imperial College's ability. Furthermore, I'm an abandoned person from great ruins. All of you have wanted to chase me away, and now you want me to stand out for Imperial College? You're just chasing rainbows." Yu Qinghong was so angry that she was speechless. Monk Yun Kei said, "But you're a student of our Imperial College. Now Imperial College is in trouble. How can you not help?" Qin Mu laughed. "After so many years, could there not be a genius that could rival Daozi in Imperial College? Furthermore, Imperial Preceptor's disciples haven't appeared. For Imperial Preceptor to be the #1 man under gods, his disciples must be extraordinary as well. With his disciples around, why should I take matters into my own hands?" The heart of everyone trembled slightly and hope was renewed. Imperial Preceptor was known as the #1 man under gods, and each of his disciples was extremely outstanding. If the disciples of Imperial Preceptor came forward, they just might defeat this Daozi of Dao sect. Ling Yuxiu frowned lightly and replied in a soft voice, "But Imperial Preceptor's disciples are all not Imperial College's scholars." While they were chatting, another few Imperial scholars had gone forward, but they all lost without an exception. There were even people who planned to use the tactic of several people taking turns to fight Daozi Lin Xian to exhaust his vital chi cultivation and not give him time to rest. However, this idea was too filthy, and soon there were directorates coming to stop them. After Daozi Lin Xian won a dozen rounds, his expression turned solemn and said to Dan Yangzi, who was beside him, "Senior uncle, Imperial College is very terrifying." Dan Yangzi nodded his head gently and said softly, "These Imperial scholars are all very strong. If all these scholars grew up, no sects could fight them." Even though there was no one in Imperial College who could defeat Daozi Lin Xian, every single one of the scholars was extremely powerful, and all of them were considered first-class strong practitioners of their realms. And the most terrifying thing was that these kinds of strong practitioners were everywhere in Imperial College. For big sects like Dao sect, they could groom one or two outstanding existents like Daozi and didn't have many strong practitioners like Chu Ping and Kuan Ziyu. However, in Imperial College there were all kinds of strong practitioners were everywhere. This was very terrifying. Daozi Lin Xian's gaze passed everyone and landed on Qin Mu. Qin Mu seemed to feel and looked towards him, smiled as a sign of acknowledgement. Lin Xian gave a smile in return and was bewildered. It's not that there aren't outstanding individuals in Imperial College, but why isn't he coming out to challenge me? Pinnacle of the Jade Mountain, Hall of Supreme Learning. All of the hall's directorates, Empire's chancellors and secretaries of Imperial College were present, and every one of them had a grim expression. Time and time again there would be people hurrying in to report, and with every news they heard, their expressions turned even uglier. Only the young patriarch who was sitting on the saint's seat had a tranquil and calm expression, and was not the least concerned about the wins and losses. At this moment, the news from outside came one another. Reporting to Grand Chancellor, Daozi of Dao sect has defeated the second prince. Daozi has defeated the heir of Southern Peace King, Zhou Yin. Daozi has defeated Western Peace King's Princess Duo Duo. Ling Shiji of Heavenly Strategies Manor was also defeated. Lin Qiuhe was injured by Daozi. After some time, there was finally no one coming to report, but everyone's expression had turned extremely ugly. No one coming forward to report meant that there were no imperial scholars continuing to challenge Daozi Lin Xian. The air of arrogance and acute spirit of these scholars of Imperial College had already been dispelled by this young Daozi, and they could only watch as he blocked the gate. An empire's chancellor frowned and asked, "For so many years, our Imperial College has educated countless experts, and they are the backbone of this empire. Can't we even find a person who can be a match for Daozi?" A directorate shook his head and replied, "There are 3 to 5 geniuses over these years, and they're no inferior to Daozi of Dao sect. However, these people are no longer scholars and have left Imperial College to assume official duties in the Imperial Court. Our Imperial College is different from these sects of the martial world. There's no such thing as leaving a sect in the martial world, but once a scholar leaves our Imperial College, he is no longer a scholar." Everyone let out a murky breath, and Daoist Ling Yun sighed. "Are we just going to let this Daozi block the gate? Isn't this too cowardly?" Everyone was silent. Suddenly, Monk Fa Qing of Hall of Azure Yang said, "Quickly report this matter up to Imperial Preceptor and ask him to send his disciples here. They just might be able to defeat Daozi." "Big Monk, Imperial Preceptor's disciples aren't our Imperial scholars. Even if they defeat Daozi of Dao sect, will Dao sect accept the outcome?" Right at this moment, a ship floated outside and berthed at the pinnacle of the Jade Mountain. A few young people walked down from the ship and came to the Hall of Supreme Learning without consulting anyone. The person in the lead bowed and said, "Teachers, we students are under the tutelage of Imperial Preceptor, and Imperial Preceptor had heard about Daozi of Dao sect coming forward to cause trouble, therefore, he ordered us to come forward." All the chancellors, directorates and secretaries in the hall looked at one another. They then all looked at the young patriarch, and a secretary said solemnly, "Grand Chancellor, Imperial Preceptor's disciples aren't scholars of our Imperial College. It's still up to Grand Chancellor's decision whether or not they could represent our Imperial College in battle." Chancellor Ba Shan with a bearded face suddenly slammed the table in protest. "Ridiculous! So what if Imperial Preceptor's disciples defeat Daozi of Dao sect? Imperial Preceptor's disciples were groomed using the old ways and taught personally by Imperial Preceptor. There's no difference between them and the disciples that are groomed by those sects. If this matter was to be spread out and reach the ears of Dao sect is bound to rebel. When Dao sect rebels, all the orthodox paths in the world would rebel as well. Who among us here is going to be responsible for this crime? Who is able to be responsible?" That secretary retorted angrily, "You're the chancellor, so you're justified, so what would you do?" "What would I do?" Chancellor Ba Shan laughed out loud and shouted sternly, "Whatever I do will be better than what you secretaries can do. All of you secretaries only bother to look after that tower of lousy books and say that you're researching skills and divine arts, but what have you researched out after these few years? If you have the ability, then go and research a way to counter pre-celestial supreme mystery technique, so that our scholars wouldn't be so awkward and helpless when others are blocking the gate." In Hall of Supreme Learning, all the secretaries went into a fury and shouted back, Didn't we hand in all the skills and divine arts we researched out to you guys? It's because you directorates and chancellors are useless and unable to groom the scholars for any good. Well said. For example, what is Hall of Supreme Healing doing? Every day they're teaching scholars to refine pills and gather herbs, neglecting all the proper business. Frequently having scholars puke blood or having their faces turn black from being poisoned. They still have the face to collect their salary. All the imperial physicians of Hall of Supreme Healing were also directorates, and when they heard what was said, they also flew into fury. Imperial physician Yu was so angry that he was trembling while retorting back. If it wasn't for us Hall of Supreme Healing to help the dying and heal the injured, more than half the scholars would have died just from poison or chi deviation. Secretaries are the useless ones. We requested for you to tidy up the remedies and prescriptions from all the various sects, yet you still haven't handed it up after such a long time. Even Empress Dowager's illness was cured by a young fellow. Why don't all of you just die? Old bastard, you should be the one to die first. Your Hall of Supreme Healing can't even cure Empress Dowager's illness, which was cured by a young fellow. Why don't you just pluck an eyelash of yours and hang yourself? The Hall of Supreme Learning broke out into a commotion, and the quarrel grew bigger and bigger, making the few Imperial Preceptor's disciples looked at each other in dismay. A moment later, Chancellor Bashan suddenly laughed and said, all right, stop quarreling. We can't make a decision, but isn't there someone calling the shots here? Grand Chancellor, what do you think? Everyone looked at the young patriarch who was sitting on the saint's seat. The young patriarch rubbed his temple, clearly showing that he was having a headache from their quarrels. He said, Imperial Preceptor's disciples aren't Imperial scholars after all. If Imperial Preceptor's disciples are to fight and win Daozi of Dao sect will still grab the chance to rebel. In that case, they would have a good reason to rebel and make our empire sink into a passive state. Therefore, let invite Imperial Preceptor over. Everyone was slightly stunned, not understanding the meaning of this. Even the few Imperial Preceptor's disciples revealed expressions of puzzlement. Those in Dao sect are all pig-headed. The young patriarch stood up and smiled. They only acknowledge stubborn logic, and if we are to cheat and trick them, we won't be able to do it. In that case, we'll use real swords and spears. It's been a while since Imperial Preceptor has given a lecture at our Imperial College, right? In the past, he still came over frequently to impart his path, sword skills, and divine arts. There are some scholars who are still considered half his students. The few of you shall go back and invite Imperial Preceptor over to teach the Imperial scholars. The few Imperial Preceptor's disciples were stunned for a moment and bowed in acknowledgement. They then left the hall and boarded the ship to leave. Chancellor Bashan looked pensive and smiled. Grand Chancellor, what you mean is to let Imperial Preceptor come over to teach his sword skills and divine arts, then let our Imperial College's students defeat Daozi of Dao sect? The young patriarch nodded his head while smiling. Chancellor Bashan raised 3 fingers and said, 3 days, there are only 3 days. Old man, for Imperial Preceptor to teach out a genius who can defeat Daozi of Dao sect in 3 days? Do you even believe it could happen? I believe. The young patriarch smiled. Bashan, don't underestimate what Imperial Preceptor can do. He is the #1 man under gods after all, and his ability far surpasses what you could imagine. Furthermore, he came to the front of Hall of Supreme Learning and looked at the mountain gate under the mountain, sneering to himself, this rascal won't wake up early unless there's benefit. I had thought he would not be able to hold himself back to compete with Daozi of Dao sect. Never would I expect him to be so good at keeping his composure. That's as well. He had gotten a bargain by inviting Imperial Preceptor over this time. Imperial Preceptor Manor. Grand Chancellor invites me over to give a lecture? Eternal Peace. Imperial Preceptor heard the words of these few disciples and was slightly stunned. What's this old fox up to? It's just a matter of stamping a seal to take you in as scholars of Imperial College. Is there a need for me to go over? A disciple explained. Grand Chancellor meant that Dao sect only acknowledged stubborn logic, and if they knew we were Master's disciples, they would definitely not admit it and grab the chance to rebel. Imperial Preceptor smiled. Dao sect is indeed pig-headed. I had met Dao Master before in my early years, and he had indeed a bad temper and only acknowledged stubborn logic. Oh well, I'll go over. Invite Little Poison King over. Fu Yuanqing came and Imperial Preceptor gave him a dagger. You saw my wound before, so now replicate it on my body. Make it more realistic. Fu Yuanqing jumped in shock. He wielded the dagger and carved his chest, making Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor all bloody. He then used the blood as coloring to make the wound even more realistic. Let the wound have some bad smell. The gaze of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor flickered and said, Fu Yuanqing scattered some powder on his wound and make the wound bad smelling but not too heavy. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor then said, now add some perfume. Fu Yuanqing followed what he said and scattered some perfume on it to use the fragrance to cover the bad smell. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor then changed his clothes and gave some thought before ordering a person to bring some rouge and powder over. He then ordered a servant girl to make him flush from being ill. After everything was done, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor smiled and asked, now can we hide from the eyes and ears of rebelling traitors? Fu Yuanqing smiled. What do you mean is that there are rebelling traitors in Imperial College? In that case, it's best for Imperial Preceptor to bring some experts. That way you would look less confident. Imperial College being so big, so there would naturally be some rebelling traitors among them. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor understood what he meant and said, however, this is the capital city, who dares to kill me here? As for Imperial College, there are much more experts there than the palace and there's no need to bring experts. Follow along so that Empress Dowager won't take the chance to rush in and kill you. Fu Yuanqing gave a sigh of relief. His originally wished that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor would bring him along to prevent Empress Dowager from taking the chance to kill him. Suddenly the bell rang in Imperial College and resounded throughout the whole mountain. Most of the Imperial scholars that were waiting in front of the mountain gate heard the bell ringing, and all of them immediately went up the mountain. Qin Mu was puzzled and Ling Yuxiu explained to him, this is the bell that summons all of the Imperial scholars to gather. Once the bell is heard, all are to gather in front of Hall of Supreme Learning. Grand Chancellor most likely has something to say. Wei Yong asked worriedly, could it be that since we can't defeat this Daozi of Dao sect, so Imperial College is going to be disbanded? Most of the scholars looked at him angrily, and Wei Yong immediately pulled back his head. When he came up to the mountain, he could see a vast crowd in front of Hall of Supreme Learning. No matter if it was the royalties or commoners, they were all gathered here. After a moment later, everyone was already gathered and the young patriarch smiled. Imperial Preceptor, please. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor appeared in front of Hall of Supreme Learning and smiled. Grand Chancellor, in that case, I shall overstep my authority. Fu Yuanqing followed behind him and looked around. He frowned and thought to himself, which is my little junior brother? When Qin Mu detoxified the 1,000 opportunity poison on Empress Dowager, he saw Qin Mu's appearance by the eyes of the bug. However, there were too many people here and he couldn't find Qin Mu's location in a short time. The young patriarch smiled. You originally came here from time to time to be a directorate to teach the scholars. It's just that you didn't come these recent years, so you couldn't be considered overstepping your authority. Please. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor came to the front of the platform and took a look around. It's difficult to decline Grand Chancellor's magnificent hospitality. I shall open the forum and talk about swords, and I'll only talk for 2 days and not touch on the rest. Chancellor Ba Shan muttered softly. Wasn't it 3 days? The young patriarch took a glance at him and said, Dao sect is only going to block our Imperial College's gate for 3 days. Now half a day is already gone, so if Imperial Preceptor is to talk for 3 days, it would be dreadfully late. Chancellor Ba Shan sighed. It's so hard for Imperial Preceptor to come and give a lecture, and yet he couldn't talk for more than 2 days. What a pity. Imperial Preceptor giving a lecture personally is equivalent to Rulai of Great Thunderclap Monastery explaining the scriptures, Dao Master of Dao sect imparting his skills, and the Cult Master of Heavenly Devil Cult propagating the doctrine. How hard is it to come by? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor slowly walked down from the platform and said leisurely, What is a sword? Is the nature of a sword fixed by a fixed shape? I strongly disapprove. Some people said that there were myriad of moves in a sword, and some people said that there were only 14 moves. Stab, flick, wave, cleave, hack, poke, jab, parry, curve, smear, sweep, raise, intercept, and shave. This is a misconception as well. He walked down and most of the scholars below instantly felt a pressure on them. It was as if an extremely sharp sword was hanging above their heads and was about to split them in half. That kind of unrivaled momentum seemed to be wanting to tear apart their bodies, their spirit embryos, their consciousness and their souls. If the sword is fixed, that would no longer be a path. The path is boundless, so how can it only have 14 moves? He walked down step by step and the pressure grew larger and larger, but his voice was tranquil. Suddenly his voice was like sharp sword thrusting into everyone's ears. Sword, why can't it be sound? Why can't sword be light? Why can't it be color? Why can't it be vital chi? Why can't it be a gaze? His gaze swept across most of the scholars' faces, and many scholars couldn't resist unsheathing their swords to block, yet they blocked nothing at all, making them perspire in cold sweat. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor smiled. Thus, does a sword only still have 14 moves? Cold sweat broke out on Qin Mu's forehead, and only now did he realize how powerful Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was. Village Chief taught him the most basic 14 moves of sword techniques, and Qin Mu changed these fundamental sword techniques into numbers. He could replicate any move as long as he saw it once. At that time, Qin Mu had thought that it was the pinnacle of the sword. And now, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had obviously struck out a new path for himself on the traditional foundation of sword skills, and had further developed the traditional sword skills. His thinking was even broader, and thus he had created other fundamental sword forms outside of the 14 fundamental sword forms. An out-of-the-ordinary accomplishment, it's no wonder he is the #1 man under gods. Qin Mu exclaimed endlessly in admiration in his heart. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's thinking was too ahead of his time. Or maybe it couldn't be said ahead of his time, and instead, it was him who was pushing this generation forward, pushing the paths, skills and divine arts to move forward, pushing the people of this generation forward. Therefore, I had created another few moves on the basis of the 14 fundamental sword techniques. For the next 2 days, I will teach you these few basic sword techniques, and I won't talk about other sword techniques at all. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor stopped, and the smile on his face vanished as his expression turned solemn. But before we start, I want you to forget the shape of your sword. Sword can be light, can be sound, can be color, and can be sight. Therefore, sword doesn't need to have a fixed form. It can be long, it can be short, it can be hard, it can be soft, and it can attack from any angle. If you can forget the shape of a sword, you can learn my sword skill. The first move of my sword skill, Spiral. His fingertip moved, and instantly there were countless of fine vital chi that was like sword lights surging out. They turned into a sword pillar and stabbed forward. This is Spiral. This is one of the moves in Great Six Directions sword skill, and looked like a stab, but the sword pillar was actually formed by countless of sword lights swirling around each other. These sword lights constantly moved and constantly changed their positions. Qin Mu had seen similar sword skill from Chu Ping. However, what Chu Ping executed was a hack. Stab and hack all looked like basic sword moves, but what formed the sword moves inside was actually Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's spiral sword form. There was still a difference between spiral sword form and coil sword form of the 14 basic sword form. Coil sword form was exerting strength on the sword's handle to coil the opponent's weapon, while spiral sword form gathered the strength to burst forth a world-shaking strike. The greatest difference between the spiral sword form that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had executed and Chu Ping's was that every sword in Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's sword pillar had a different transformation, while there was no transformation in any sword when Chu Ping controlled his sword. Therefore, he was defeated by Daozi Lin Xian with a horsetail whisk, which was used as a sword. If it was Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, he could have blocked Daozi Lin Xian's horsetail whisk. Not only that, from what Qin Mu could see, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's sword moved as a whole. His sword pillar was formed by countless of sword lights, and every sword light was an individual, but when he stabbed, they all stabbed as a whole. If one wanted to break this sword move like his, they would have to overcome the power of the sword pillar when confronting it. Only then could they break every single sword light in the sword pillar. The method Daozi Lin Xian used to handle Chu Ping was totally useless against him. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's foundation is as solid as mine, and even much more solid than Daozi Lin Xian. Qin Mu was astonished. How could there be such an existence? He was literally like a heavenly god. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor meticulously explained the key to exerting the power of spiral sword form, and it was extremely detailed. It gave Qin Mu the feeling that it was as if Village Chief was teaching him sword techniques. Spiral sword form was an extension of the fundamental sword techniques, and Qin Mu's 14 fundamental sword techniques were already extremely solid, and after going through Village Chief's teachings, it wasn't hard for him to learn the spiral sword form. A hint was all that was needed for him to comprehend and be clear, making him listen as if he was drunk and stupefied. However, it was only him. The others were all pondering strenuously when they heard Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's explanation. There were some that didn't even bother to think and just memorized it carefully. There were also some that used Vital Chi to control the pen to quickly note down Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's words and plan to slowly comprehend them in the future. Those that could understand and completely comprehend it right, there was still a minority after all. Most of the people were at a loss. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor finished explaining spiral sword form and said, "Scholars, now you can try to execute it once." Most of the directorates, secretaries, and chancellors all stirred their spirits. They were also listening to the lecture just now and were entranced. However, they had no choice but to raise their spirits now as their gazes landed on the bodies of the 1,000 scholars. The reason Imperial Preceptor wanted to let them try out was actually because he wanted to see if there were any individuals among these people that were worth noticing. Those that had a strong comprehension must definitely be picked out to challenge Dao Zilin Xian 2 days later. In front of Hall of Supreme Learning, the scholars started to try out clumsily and tried to transform their own Vital Chi into Sword Chi to execute spiral sword form. There were some people who couldn't control the Sword Chi and their Vital Chi crumbled, shooting off in all directions and almost hurting the scholars beside them, raising a ruckus. There were also people who gathered Chi as sword pillar, but when they controlled the Sword Chi to swirl around the center, they wouldn't turn no matter what and just continue on a straight path. There were also many divine arts practitioners that had learned the Great Six Directions sword skill taught by Imperial College. Great Six Directions sword skill was originally created by Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, and since they had learned it before, their execution naturally looked alike. There were also some people who had got Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's advice, and their sword skills went up another level. Even though there weren't the samadhi of spiral sword form, but their power had been raised hugely. There were also some people who were extremely intelligent, and even though they hadn't learned spiral sword form before, they were still able to comprehend part of the profundity in it after the teachings. They executed the sword pillar, and even though the transformation of their sword skill was still rough, each time they executed it, it would become more and more agile. Qin Mu was also trying to execute spiral sword form, but he immediately frowned as he stared blankly at his own Vital Chi thread. Other people's Vital Chi were as fine as hair, so when they executed their sword pillar, it was formed by incomparably fine sword Chi. Meanwhile, his Vital Chi thread was as thick as an arm, and he was to use such thick Vital Chi to execute spiral sword form? How thick would the sword pillar be? The youth shook his head. Such a thick sword pillar would no longer be a sword pillar, and should instead be called a sword mountain. Stabbing with a mountain formed from sword Chi? Even though my Vital Chi is dense, it's still not that dense. I can't execute that kind of sword mountain. Beside Qin Mu, even the little fox was learning spiral sword form, which looked pretty authentic. Wei Yong, Yun Ke, and the rest were already trying to make the sword Chi swirl, with Ling Yuxiu and Chan Wanyun progressing the fastest. Only he was staring into the air blankly. After some time, Qin Mu tried to release an arm-thick Vital Chi thread, and thought to himself, since that couldn't work in that case, can I use spiral sword form to break down my Vital Chi thread? Once he thought of it, he immediately did it and tried out the method Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor taught him to break down his Vital Chi thread excitedly. His Vital Chi was firm and extremely pure, which was why it was hard to refine it into a thread. Especially after he had learned secrets of elixir hearts, his Vital Chi became purer and purer. No one in the village had taught him how to refine Chi into thread, because the one with the highest attainments in sword techniques was Village Chief. However, Village Chief only taught him one sword move and 14 sword forms, disregarding everything else without exception and letting Qin Mu's Vital Chi thread to grow sturdier. A hint of inspiration flashed across Qin Mu's mind this time, and felt that he would definitely succeed using spiral sword form to refine Chi into thread. The spiral sword form taught by Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was indeed extraordinary fine, and he got hold of the trick very quickly, revealing an expression of joy. In front of Hall of Supreme Learning, The young patriarch's gaze landed on Qin Mu and couldn't help frowning slightly. What is this rascal doing fiddling with a stick instead of learning the sword technique? Not far away, Chan Wanyun looked at Qin Mu's vital chi stick and gave a smile. He may be strong, but his comprehension was so and far from mine. At this moment, Qin Mu suddenly turned wild with joy and laughed out loudly. With his voice like thunder, it resounded throughout the entire place. It's done, it's finally done. The heavens aren't blind. I have finally refined vital chi thread. In front of Hall of Supreme Learning, thousands of scholars along with directorates, secretaries, and chancellor were all startled and looked towards the source of the laughter. A scholar was at a loss and asked, what had he refined? A scholar beside him was also slightly at a loss. I think he said vital chi thread. I might have heard wrongly. Those directorates, secretaries, and chancellors had awkward expressions as they were between laughter and tears. Chancellor Ba Shan burst into laughter and said, interesting little fellow. Vital chi thread is the basis of all sword skill. If he hadn't even refined vital chi thread, how did he become a scholar of our Imperial College? Which examiner did he bribe to get in? Chancellor Ba Shan, you were not around Imperial College previously, so you don't know him. A directorate smiled and explained, this rascal is called Qin Mu, an abandoned person from Great Ruins. He defeated Taoist Ling Yun and was chosen as an imperial scholar by the emperor himself. Who dares to not let him in after being chosen by the emperor? An abandoned person of Great Ruins defeated Ling Yun and was chosen by the emperor? Chancellor Ba Shan looked at Taoist Ling Yun and sneered. Ling Yun, did you go easy on him? Was the emperor bribed as well? Taoist Ling Yun was ashamed and angry at the same time. Back then he was smashed out from Hall of Pure Yang and 2 sword cases were emptied out from stabbing him, making him lose face in front of the emperor, civil and military ministers as well as these colleagues and scholars. Was this still called going easy? Was there this kind of bribery in going easy? Ain't the price a little too high? However, Ba Shan was a chancellor after all and the person who was just lower than the Grand Chancellor, therefore he had to be cautious of offending him. He could only pull a long face and keep quiet so that he won't get himself in trouble. This Chancellor Ba Shan was the famous loudmouth in Imperial College, after all, not giving any face when blurting out. Most of the rumors and rubbish news in Imperial College were basically spread by him. That's why he was also secretly known as Loudmouth Ba. If he quarreled with him, even the chicken in the chicken coop would know about his embarrassing deed the next day. Meanwhile, Fu Yuanqing, who was in the distance, was surprised. That's my little junior brother from the same master. He looks pretty dim-witted. Master is so useless now, to actually find such a dumb goose that looks like a pushover. Painstakingly cultivating 7 to 8 years. I've finally refined my vital chi thread. Qin Mu was unable to contain his joy and found it difficult to conceal the excitement in his heart, as he looked at the vital chi thread in front of his face. Now he could finally not execute his incomparably thick vital chi thread anymore. Now his vital chi thread could also be very exquisite. Between his fingers and palm, his vital chi thread flowed gently and was as thin as a hair, which was very perfect. If one observed carefully, they could see that this vital chi thread from Qin Mu was different from the rest. This vital chi thread was actually formed by many incomparably fine sword chi, and every sword was constantly transforming and swirling. However, when the vital chi thread moved, it was still incomparably agile, so agile that no one would notice that the vital chi thread actually had a structure. I wonder how far can my vital chi thread be executed to? Qin Mu looked around and wanted to try how far he can extend his vital chi thread out to. When his gaze suddenly swept Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor, he was slightly startled. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor was looking at his hand and his gaze landed on the vital chi thread that was moving around his fingers and palm. He seemed to feel Qin Mu's gaze and raised his gaze slightly, causing both their gazes to meet. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor gave a smile and said in a low voice, interesting. Qin Mu retracted his gaze and gave up on his idea. There were too many people here, so he was unable to test it out. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor waited for a while more and said, all right. Now I shall teach all of you the second kind of basic sword form, swim sword form. Sword is unrestricted while flying in the air, and the form of the sword is also unrestricted, therefore a sword can swim. Just like a dragon swimming, like a snake swimming, like a fish swimming, like a phoenix soaring in the air, like a mortal stepping on air, So why should we rigidly adhere to the fundamental sword techniques of our predecessors? Qin Mu's spirit trembled. The second basic sword technique that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had founded was still like a breath of fresh air to everyone, broadening their horizons. It was as if a door was pushed open and they could see a world that was much more vast. I'm right to come to Imperial College. Patriarch has the foresight, he thought to himself. In front of the mountain gate, Dan Yongzi raised his head and looked up to see layers and layers of palaces on the Jade Mountain, looking very deep. There were dense vegetations on the mountain that were dyed jade by the chi of the 9 dragons. Meanwhile, the wind brought along Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's voice once in a while, which consisted of a sentence or two, and after he heard them, he only had a feeling of everything becoming clear. Senior Uncle Dan Yongzi. Daozi Lin Xian also faintly heard the voice coming from the mountain and hesitated a moment before asking, "Is the person giving a lecture on top of the mountain Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor? I only heard a sentence or two from him and benefited greatly from them. Contrary to expectation, I felt he." Dan Yongzi smiled and said, "It's okay to say." Daozi Lin Xian mustered his courage and said, "Even though I have not completely heard the words he said to teach the scholars, his sword skills have indeed reached an unimaginable realm. Even though the techniques that were imparted down from our Dao sect have profound concrete details and include everything, his understanding has surpassed our Dao sect. Disciple feels that maybe Imperial Preceptor is really thinking of pushing forward the development of the paths, skills, and divine arts. In that case, why do we have to block the gate?" Dan Yongzi smiled. "Daozi, other than listening to one's words, you also need to watch one's deeds. This is then the way of life. No one denies Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's talent. Back then when he met Dao Master also expected him to be the genius that appears once every 500 years and become a saint in the future. This shows how high Dao Master had evaluated him. But what happens if he doesn't become a saint and turns to an evil instead?" Daozi Lin Xian was puzzled. Dan Yongzi sneered. With his power, he could completely push the paths, skills, and divine arts into motion, but he has the ambition of wild wolves and wants to subdue all the sects and not give them any way to survive. This is one of the points. The second point is Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor is actually using the teachings of Heavenly Devil Cult. Heavenly Devil Cult is equivalent to the fake path under the name of a fake saint, which is really just cultivating the devil path. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor is in cahoots with Heavenly Devil Cult and is the enemy of our orthodox path. Daozi Lin Xian's heart trembled in fear and said, "Good and evil can't coexist together. With him associating with the devil path, the more talented he is, the more threatening he will be." Dan Yongzi nodded his head and said, "He opened primary schools, colleges, and Imperial College. This indeed has benefits, but there are also disadvantages. Dao Master started to teach you when you were a kid, and now you're still learning from Dao Master. Could Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor's primary schools, colleges, and Imperial College, as well as those teachers and directorates, have the same knowledge and abilities that Dao Master has? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor opening primary schools, college, and Imperial College may seem to give many people the chance to cultivate into experts, but it also severs the paths for geniuses. This is the main reason why our Dao sect is opposing him." His expression turned grim as he continued. "The paths, skills, and divine arts are pushed into motion by geniuses, a genius like Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor. Most of the people live their entire lives ordinarily and only know how to learn and use, having no initiative or drive to open up new horizons. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor is creating a profound and long-lasting tragedy for severing the paths for geniuses. By popularizing this primary schools, colleges, and Imperial College, everyone would become expert for a moment and become very remarkable. However, everyone would be devoid of accomplishments, just like making mooncakes, which are all from the same mold. Who can cultivate talent like Daozi? There's a reason for sects to exist, and if he doesn't see this, our Dao sect would pledge our lives being his enemy." Daozi Lin Xian understood, and his heart was blazing with a desire to battle. Dan Yongzi smiled. "You can view Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor as an enemy, but you can't stand against his paths, skills, and divine arts, so as to avoid your scope becoming shallow." This lecture of Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor went on for 2 full days without any breaks. There were many people who couldn't hold on any longer and became sleepy. There were some that just slept in front of Hall of Supreme Learning, and there were some that went back to rest. Qin Mu and some other scholars who had dense cultivation were still bursting with life and listening to his lecture attentively. It's just that he was of the 5 elements realm and other people were divine arts practitioners of 6 directions and 7 stars realm. The third basic sword form that Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor talked about was called drill, which was also extremely weird. When a single sword was used, the sword tip would rapidly spin and was good for breaking through all defensive skills like Diamond Body. Meanwhile, when many swords were used, it was even more terrifying. Many swords would form a huge drill sword form that could break through anything. In 2 days, he only talked about these 3 sword forms and didn't teach anything else. He instead allowed the Imperial scholars to ask more questions for him to answer. When he finished answering all the questions, Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor rose and smiled to the young patriarch. I shall give these scholars half-day to sleep, rest and eat. Then I will have to bother Grand Chancellor to handle the things afterward. The young patriarch smiled. With Imperial Preceptor's matchless talent, did you find any talents this time? Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor nodded his head. There are only 1 or 2 who had got my sword technique. Grand Chancellor should be able to see who they are. That's right. Are you really going to resign and leave? The young patriarch nodded his head. I don't have long to live and there's no need for me to cling to power. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor sighed with regret. When have you been reluctant to give up your power? If you had wanted to be an official, I could even give up my position of the Imperial Preceptor to you. It's just that you aren't willing to do it. You are half my master, and if you are to leave, I will be very sad. There will be less a person as my Dao friend. The young patriarch smiled. There's no banquet in the world that never ends. We enter the banquet when we're born and we leave the banquet when we're dead. It's time for you and me to part our ways. Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor looked towards the sky and muttered, Are there really immortals up in the sky? How wonderful would it be if you could become an immortal in the sky? And look at this era that you and I had created. He shook his head and boarded the ship, which slowly sailed away from Imperial College. The mess cooks from Cookhouse pushed their trolleys to the front of Hall of Supreme Learning and asked every scholar to sit on the ground and eat in front of the hall. The young patriarch then ordered all scholars to return to their residences to rest for half a day and wake when the bell rang. Qin Mu and the rest returned to their residences, and when he passed by Chan Wanyun's place, he saw that Chan Wanyun was still not asleep and was currently practicing diligently. It's worth learning from senior brother Chan. Qin Mu was greatly motivated and returned to his residence to put down the little fox who was already asleep. He then slowly moved his footsteps and executed Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique. His speed gradually became faster and faster as he sunk into a half-asleep state while cultivating. Not long later, Chan Wanyun heard a whoosh and saw Qin Mu sprinting past the front of his door. He immediately chased after him, only to see Qin Mu's eyes were half closed as he sprinted across the entire mountain frantically and couldn't help being stunned. Sleepwalking. Qin Mu's current state really did look like sleepwalking. He was frantically sprinting while he was asleep, yet he still could see his surroundings and avoid obstructions. What made Chan Wanyun bewildered was when Qin Mu was sprinting, he actually still continued to execute his fist skills and leg skills, raising wind from the vigorous blows. From time to time, he pulled out his pig slaughtering knife, hacking here and there. Junior brother Qin has such a strong power, and yet he still works harder than others. Even when he's sleeping, he doesn't forget to train. Even though his comprehension may be slightly lacking, his diligence is worth my learning. Chan Wanyun was greatly motivated and returned to his residence to train diligently. However, Qin Mu wasn't completely asleep. His state was different from sleepwalking, and this was his unique method of cultivation. Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique had different points in cultivation compared to normal people. When he sprinted while cultivating, his cultivating speed would become faster. Meanwhile, his brain was resting and his fist and leg moves were executed all by muscle memory. Qin Mu had relied on this kind of cultivation method to allow himself to increase leaps and bounds. When he came to Eternal Peace Empire, he had to learn the social custom of Eternal Peace, and that's why he didn't continue to cultivate like this anymore. After Qin Mu had sprinted for 4 hours, he woke up, feeling extremely refreshed. At this moment, he heard a familiar voice laughing. Have you rested enough? Qin Mu immediately turned and greeted, Patriarch. Currently, there were no other people on the mountain, and even those chancellors, directorates and secretaries had all gone to rest. They had also listened to Imperial Preceptor's lecture for 2 days without a break and needed to adjust themselves. The young patriarch smiled and said, What thoughts do you have on Imperial Preceptor's lecture? Qin Mu exclaimed in admiration. Imperial Preceptor, an existence that's like a heavenly god. He thinks what ordinary people don't dare to think, and he does what ordinary people don't dare to do. He is indeed matchless. The young patriarch walked down the mountain and asked, How much have you learned regarding the sword skills that Imperial Preceptor taught? I don't dare to say I have learned it completely, but to some extent for sure. Qin Mu continued, Learning sword from village chief, I thought I had already got all of the profundity of sword skills. Never would I have thought there are still some things I have yet learned. The young patriarch said, The sentence that there's no end to learning is wrong, and it should be there's no end to creating. One can't achieve only by learning all one's life. It is creation that has no limit. You're still young now and need to absorb the stuff that others have created. When your knowledge has accumulated to a certain extent, you must try to create. If you always learn, you will always be a student, but once you create a move, you will be master. When they came to the front of the Jade Cliff, they only saw an old and a young Taoist sitting in front of the mountain gate of Imperial College. The young patriarch seemed to smile and not smile. I had invited Imperial Preceptor over to preach and give a lecture. Now that he already talked for 2 days and you have got such a huge benefit, aren't you not going? Qin Mu sighed. As long as Patriarch gives the command, dare disciple disobey? The young patriarch sneered and kicked him down the cliff. Rascal, making it sounds nice. They have blocked the gate for so long and I don't see you budging. If you weren't given such benefits, would you be so willing? Aren't you still going? Qin Mu landed on the ground and rubbed his buttocks as he walked towards the mountain gate. At this moment, there were no imperial scholars around the mountain gate, and the scholars were still sleeping and resting. Only the 2 Taoists were left outside the mountain gate. Not far away there was also a strange beast that was guarding the mountain gate. The beast had a dragon head and a Qilin's body. It was chained up and was taking a nap. Daozi Lin Xian saw Qin Mu walking over and his heart trembled slightly. He looked at Dan Yongzi and said, Senior uncle. Dan Yongzi raised his eyelids and gave a look at Qin Mu. Go ahead. Imperial Preceptor lecturing the scholars was only to groom this person. You have no need to worry about losing. Daozi Lin Xian understood and stood up to welcome Qin Mu. Their qi activities crossed each other and they both stopped to bow as a greeting. Qin Mu said, Imperial Scholar Qin Mu meets Daozi Lin Xian. I'm of 5 Elements realm. Daozi Lin Xian replied respectfully, Daozi Lin Xian meets Scholar Qin Mu. I'm of 6 Directions realm and I'll seal my 6 Directions divine treasure. He sealed his 6 Directions divine treasure and Qin Mu said, Does Daozi want to use weapons? He pulled out a bamboo cane from his back before taking down a pig slaughtering knife. He then took down his iron hammer before taking down Junior Protector sword. Just as Daozi Lin Xian wanted to say sometime, Dan Yongzi suddenly said, No need for weapons, just use skills, divine arts, and close combat prowess. Daozi didn't understand and placed his horsetail whisk down. Since Brother Qin has said so, I shan't use weapons. Dan Yongzi secretly gave a sigh of relief and moved his gaze away from Junior Protector sword. If they were to use weapons, Daozi would be at a huge disadvantage. The shape of this sword made his heart jump in shock. The sword sheath had the mouth of a fish dragon and looked like a first-ranking high official's sword. If it was real, Daozi Lin Xian's horsetail whisk would be broken the moment they touched, and there would be no need to compete anymore. Qin Mu gave a smile and 2 layers of pupils suddenly appeared in his eyes. After opening Heaven's Eyes and Green Heaven's Eyes one after another, the ground beneath his feet suddenly sank and the limestone tiles cracked and the shattered rocks on the ground floated up from the trembling. Ha! Qin Mu exhaled and shouted as he gave a punch out. The hundreds of shattered limestone that had just floated up became even finer by the punch of his. The biggest rock was also merely as big as a pea, and the smaller ones were like sesame. Countless of shattered rock followed his punch and flew towards Daozi Lin Xian. Ing! The dragon roars resonated out and the force of his punch actually merged with the shattered rocks. turning into a sand dragon which soared towards Daozi Lin Xian just like a real divine dragon. At the same time, his footsteps moved like a phantom at an extremely fast speed. He quickly followed the punch force and reached Daozi Lin Xian's side. Daozi was astonished. One of his eyes suddenly turned white and the other one turned black as he raised his hand forward for a madra. His jade-like palm looked like a jade stamp. The stamp was like a mountain, and on the bottom side of the stamp, there were weird bird characters and worm languages which were incomparably queer. The madra brought along a simple and ancient aura with it as it faced the true dragon. Heaven-flipping madra. The forces from the two of them burst forth and a dull and astonishing boom sounded out. It was like the sound of thunder getting muffled by the dense thunderclouds and couldn't travel out. The dragon head Qilin in front of the mountain gate heard this muffled boom and raised its head to look around puzzledly. Qinmu only felt that his Tempest of the Nine Dragons seemed to have met a wall that stretched from the earth to heaven, and his force couldn't penetrate this wall, making him elated. This Daozi sure is extraordinary. He's much stronger than all those scholars I have seen before. Tempest of the Nine Dragons might look overbearing and fierce on the outside, but it was actually an extremely exquisite move which contained 45 dragon forces in it. This force was hidden in the center of the palm, and if people received this palm head-on, the 45 dragon forces would pass through their bodies and cause incomparably terrifying damages to their organs. This heaven-flipping madra from Daozi Lin Xian actually formed an impenetrable defense and blocked the 45 kinds of dragon forces that were hidden in the center of his palm in the area between their two facing palms. This showed how powerful Daozi was. And at this moment, those countless of rocks flew past Daozi Lin Xian's body. Daoist Lin Xian felt a bone-chilling cold, and his yin-yang Dao eyes could see that among the fine shattered rocks, there were actually incomparably fine vital qi threads connecting them. These vital qi threads were incomparably fine, and under his yin-yang Dao eyes, the vital qi threads were actually fine spiraling swords, and these fine swords were sword qi formed by Qinmu's vital qi. These vital qi, which were originally hidden in the rock, were trying to come out from these rocks now. Will carving madra. The 10 fingers of Daozi Lin Xian moved. With a palm facing up and a palm facing down, a hum was heard as 2 wheels appeared above his head and 2 below his feet. These wheels were formed by vital qi and had peculiar structures. It seemed to be a formation, just that the top and bottom were opposite. Just as the formation shrouded him, the fine shattered rocks suddenly turned into dust and permeated the sky. The sword qi hidden inside the countless rocks instantly merged together to form a vital qi green dragon. The countless of sword qi formed the body of the green dragon as it stirred vigorously. Spiral sword form. Between the 2 wheels that were spinning in the opposite directions from each other instantly appeared countless of fine swords which formed a sword screen, colliding with the stirring green dragon. The sword qi broke into pieces and splattered in all directions. These 2 youths were not only competing for their sword moves, they were clashing with their magic power as well. If there were other scholars of Imperial College around, they would definitely be incomparably astonished. Now Qinmu was executing the spiral sword form which Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had taught him, but Qinmu didn't turn spiral sword form into a sword pillar as how Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor had taught. He had instead made countless of spiraling sword qi to turn into a green dragon. Daozi Lin Xian instantly felt pressure as Qinmu's vital qi was suppressing his vital qi. His cultivation was incomparably dense, but Qinmu's cultivation was actually still above his. This was practically impossible. Dao Sec's Pre-Celestial Supreme Mystery Technique was widely known for its vigorous magic power, and just based on the magic power of the same realm, there were no techniques from all the sects in the world that could rival Pre-Celestial Supreme Mystery Technique. Even if it was Rulai's Mahayana Sutra, which was also known for its magic power. However, now he felt that Qinmu's magic power was still above his. Daozi Lin Xian felt that his will carving madra would break any time and immediately changed his moves. Even though he didn't have a horsetail whisk, when his hands opened up, there were countless of strands flying out. Those were vital qi threads, but under his control, they were like vital qi swords stabbing outwards from the insides of the wheels, trying to sever the green dragon. Just as he made the move, Qinmu, who was outside the wheels, had already reached in front of him. Stretching his hands out and grabbing the countless of dust, Qinmu's vital qi burst forth and the dust gathered in his hand to form a spear which stabbed into the turning wheels. Dao Lin Xian used his other hand to defend with heaven-flipping madra to stop this huge spear. However, explosive bangs rang continuously in his ears as Qin Mu used his hands as knives to follow up with midnight battle across stormy cities, causing countless of knives to cut down on the wheels. His will-carving madra instantly crumbled and Dao Lin Xian immediately knew it was bad. The next moment, he received several slashes on his chest with blood flowing out as he flew backward. He borrowed the power to fly out back and still remained calm. The strands of hairs tunneled into the green dragon, and with the strands flying out in all directions, the green dragon was finally eliminated. As the green dragon fell apart, it immediately turned into hundreds of fine vital chi swords which gathered back together in a blink of an eye and burrowed into the ground. This is bad. Dao Lin Xian pushed his palm downwards and with his palm pressing down, countless strands of threads pierced into the ground and lifted his body up into the air. With the strands of threads as his legs, he sprinted in the air like he was flying. Below him, a green dragon tunneled out from the ground before tunneling back in again. It then tunneled out once again and went back into the ground. Every time the green dragon burst out from the ground, Qin Mu's feet would coincidentally land on the dragon's head as he quickly chased Dao Lin Xian, who was in the air. Qin Mu flicked his fingers one after another, and the flick of his fingers resulted in sudden claps of thunder. Between the rumbling of the thunder, a temperament had instead begun abruptly, causing Dao Lin Xian's expression to change hugely. Crap, he has stolen the initiative. I can only use the sect legacy sword skill of Dao sect. Dan Yongzi stood up and looked at the battle between Dao Lin Xian and Qin Mu. As for the half-dragon half-Qilin strange beast, it had lost its interest in what was happening this side and went back to sleep. Dao can't withstand it any longer, and he's going to use his full power. Dan Yongzi felt an astonishment in his heart. Qin Mu's attacks were simply too fast and too overbearing. As long as he took the initiative, he would not let his opponent have a chance to have a breather. He would hit continuously until the opponent admitted defeat or died. Dao Lin Xian couldn't get hold of any advantages with his vital qi, and his moves were also being suppressed by Qin Mu. By sealing his 6 directions divine treasure, there were many moves and divine arts he couldn't execute, and the only chance he had now was to use the sect legacy sword skills of Dao sect. Only the sect legacy sword skills could change the current situation and turn defeat into a victory. It was just that now even Dan Yongzi also didn't know if Dao Lin Xian could execute this sect legacy sword skills in the realm of 5 elements divine treasure. The sect legacy sword skills of Dao sect had an extremely high requirement for vital qi, and the consumption was huge as well. From Dan Yongzi's judgment, if Dao Lin Xian used that sect legacy sword skills, his vital qi would be completely depleted. Just as he thought of this, the strands in Dao Lin Xian's hand suddenly started to transform. This was a marvelous transformation as half of the strands turned black, and the other half turned white as they spread themselves out in the air. With the black and white gradually flowing around each other, it was like a taijutsu appearing in the air. The sect legacy sword skills of Dao sect, the first form of the 14 writings of Dao sword. Threading the vast movements, yin and yang come and go within 2 modes. Dao Lin Xian's arms trembled as the black and white diagram came pressuring down. Dan Yongzi gave a sigh of relief and was rather gratified. Dao Lin Xian was the Daozi after all. With his dense cultivation, he was still able to execute the sect legacy sword skills at 5 elements realm. One needed to know that there were quite a lot of practitioners cultivating the sect legacy sword skills of Dao sect, but not many of them could completely cultivate it, and nearly all that had succeeded couldn't execute it in 5 elements realm. The consumption of these sword skills was too great, and not to say those of 5 elements realm, even divine arts practitioners would find it hard to execute it. Furthermore, there was an extremely high requirement for the aptitude and comprehension for cultivating these sword skills. Among the requirements, the biggest one was algebra. Just the 10 computational canons had already caused people huge headaches, and other than the canons, there were also ancient and profound algebra records like the General Dian Computation and Jade Mirror of the 4 Unknowns. And Dao Lin Xian was the most outstanding talent among them who were proficient in algebra, and his algebra already had extremely high attainments from a young age. With a foundation in algebra, it was much easier for him to learn 14 writings of Dao sword than everyone else. Each writing of 14 writings of Dao sword was harder than the previous one, and when it came to the 14th writing of Dao sword, There was nearly no one who could succeed in cultivating it. Even the current Dao Master had also not succeeded in cultivating the 14th sword. However, Dao Master had very great expectation for Dao Zilin Xian, and felt that he could be able to succeed in cultivating the 14th sword. Dao Master had even lent Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor Dao Sec's 14 writings of Dao Sword to browse an Eternal Peace Imperial Preceptor mentioned about Dao Sword and the 3 swords of Son of Heaven in his Sword Discourse, which could totally be said that he was influenced by 14 writings of Dao Sword. Therefore one could imagine how powerful this move from Dao Zilin Xian was. As the black and white diagram came down, Qin Mu was astonished, and the sword skill that came suppressing down from above was already no mortal sword skill. With yin and yang 2 modes tangling with each other, the power that burst forth already made his heart palpitating with fear before it even reached him. His fingers flicked, and the move thunder fingers made every finger of his burst forth huge thunder booms which were incomparably penetrating. But even first-class technique like Thunderclap 8 strikes was useless when it touched that black and white diagram. The attack was like a mud cow entering the ocean, unable to raise any waves. Whoosh! Under his feet, the green dragon soared into the sky and suddenly broke apart, and turned into countless of bustling sword lights which landed into his hand to transform into a long sword. Qin Mu had a solemn expression as he faced the black and white taijutsu which came pressuring down. With the sword in his hand, it was like the most exquisite brush on a painter's hand, the heaviest step of a traveler, the vocals of a singer, the dance of a dancer. He executed the sword skill that village chief had taught him, sword treading mountains and rivers. Can the gods be cut down? Say can. Under his sword the sword light flashed. Light and dark, light and heavy, fast and slow were perfectly combined, and in that instant, the 14 basic sword moves transformed into vast rivers and mountains in his hands. 14 writings of Dao Sword from Dao sect wasn't sword skill from the secular world. So was sword picture that village chief had imparted to him. This was a sword skill to cut down God? Could the gods be cut down? People who use this sword must have no God, devil and Buddha in his heart, and must have the heart to disrespect God, devil and Buddha, and the heart to cut down gods. The corners of Dan Yangzi's eyes twitched, and he quickly stood up. At the same time, the half-dragon half-Qilin strange beast also woke up from its sleep, and suddenly raised its head to look around. In the sky, the 2 kinds of sword skill collided, and the surroundings turned snow-bright. That black and white taijutsu crumbled under the gradually expanding rivers and mountains, causing Dao Zilin Xian to suffer dozens of slashes in an instant, staining his body with blood. Suddenly his eyes lit up. They're a weakness. Qin Mu noticed his gaze and was astonished. This youth's gaze had landed on his left shoulder, and this place was coincidentally where the weakness of Overlord Body 3 Elixir technique was located. Chi Kaduo. Qin Mu raised his hand to form a Madra, Devil God Mighty Force Madra. This Madra was used to defend this left shoulder, while the sword light greatly expanded in his other hand as he stabbed at Dao Zilin Xian. Kai! Dao Zilin Xian stabbed through his palm, and the tip of the sword hit his left shoulder. However, it was blocked by the brocade clothes on Qin Mu's body and didn't pierce into his flesh. But the sword glow had stabbed in, caused a sharp pain in Qin Mu's shoulder. At the same time, Dao Zilin Xian's body trembled greatly and swayed as dozens of bloody holes appeared on his body in an instant before collapsing on the ground. Qin Mu dispersed the sharp sword which was formed by vital qi and bowed as a greeting. Daozi, you let me win. Dao Zilin Xian struggled to get up, but the bloody holes in his body were still bleeding endlessly. Dan Yangzi quickly went forward and was about to feed him medicine, but Dao Zilin Xian raised his hand to stop him and tidied his clothes. He returned the greeting, "Many thanks for the teachings," and then he consumed the medicine pills. Dan Yangzi immediately applied ointment on him to prevent him from bleeding. After that, the young and the old Taoists rose and bowed to Qin Mu. Qin Mu bowed to return the greeting and saw both of them putting on their bamboo hats, turning to leave. Qin Mu sent them off, and his face suddenly changed as he grabbed onto his left shoulder, sucking in deep cold breaths. "Ow, the pain is killing me. That elder Dan Yangzi is so stingy, didn't even give me a portion of the ointment." The pain from his left hand and shoulder had reached his soul as his bones were injured by that stab from Dao Zilin Xian. Qin Mu took in quick, cold breaths and was about to go up the mountain when he stumbled and immediately raised his hand to grab onto the half-dragon half-Qilin strange beast that was chained up for support. He had consumed too much vital qi. Using sword treadings, mountains and rivers consumed a lot of vital qi, making him very weak. Qin Mu walked past the mountain gate multiple times, but he had never noticed this strange beast, and always thought it was a statue of Dragon Qilin or some sort. Never did he expect the strange beast to feel soft to touch, and he jumped in shock. That strange beast Dragon Qilin raised its eyes and swept a look at him. It then stuck out its tongue to lick his shoulder. Qin Mu felt his shoulder gradually turning cooler and the pain slowly faded. He immediately lowered his head to look into the collar, and saw the small sword wounds caused by the sword glow was shrinking. There were a dozen sword wounds and they were all healing now. Qin Mu was astonished. This is dragon's saliva? Or is it Qilin's saliva? No matter what it is, this is a good medicinal ingredient. He immediately raised his palm and the strange beast licked his palm too. Qin Mu looked at the flesh on his palm, which was slowly growing back, and the flesh of the sword wound was like a sapling sprouting out, which quickly made the wound recover. The injuries on the bone seemed to have also healed, and his skin had also healed quickly. Senior brother, do you like to eat sour apricot? Qin Mu squatted down and took out a jade bottle and placed it under the strange beast's mouth with a smile. It's the sour kind, so sour that your teeth would fall off. Don't you like it? Then how about yellow plums? Also the super sour kind, the kind when you think of you will drool. You also don't like it? Let me treat you lemons. The strange beast rolled its eyes at him and kept quiet, ignoring him. It sat there motionlessly, and there was no saliva like dragon's saliva that was drooling out. Then what do you like to eat? Qin Mu asked. There's a big green cow on the mountain and I've been eyeing it for a long time. That Dragon Qilin strange beast suddenly opened his mouth to say while continuing to look forward motionlessly. Can you get it over? Qin Mu pat his chest and smiled. I'll definitely make friends with such a loyal brother like you. Don't worry, I'll get it over very soon. That Dragon Qilin was elated, and the saliva at the corner of its mouth was about to fall out before it sucked it back in. Qin Mu could only return to the mountain and thought to himself, it seems that the only way to trick the dragon's saliva out of it is to bring it the big green cow. I seem to have seen this big green cow somewhere before, staying in a courtyard and eating grass. I'll have to go ask Linger. She's more familiar with this mountain after running here and there. He went up the mountain, and at this timing, there were people waking up in scholars' residence and royalties' park one after another. They walked down the mountains in their groups and passed by Qin Mu. One of the princes said, after Imperial Preceptor's guidance, I feel that my cultivation has greatly improved. I should be able to fight 300 rounds with that Daozi. Second Prince Ling Yushu shook his head. Sixth brother, don't underestimate the enemy. I fought with Daozi Lin Xian and I feel that there are still some skills of him he hasn't used yet. However, Imperial Preceptor sure is extraordinary. The 3 sword forms he taught could actually merge with the other sword skills I have learned before, making the sword skills I have learned before even more perfect. In any case, I would still have the power to fight him. However, if I want to win him, it might be difficult. Ling Yushu stopped and looked at Qin Mu, who was walking by, and frowned before retracting his gaze. What's wrong, second brother? That sixth prince asked. Seventh sister is very close to him. Ling Yushu shook his head and said, actually, this person Qin Mu is good in everything, having great abilities and the reputation of a divine physician, saving Empress Dowager. However, he's still an abandoned person of great ruins after all, and it's not good for seventh sister to be in contact with him. Let's not talk about this. Let's go meet Daozi Lin Xian again. When they came down the mountain, they only heard commotions coming from the front of them and immediately went forward. Someone shouted, the 2 Taoists are gone. Ling Yushu couldn't help being stunned. He squeezed into the crowd and looked forward. Dan Yangzi and Daozi Lin Xian had indeed vanished without a trace. Could they had sounded out the difficulties and retreat to avoid defeat? Someone muttered. Ling Yushu frowned and gave a sarcastic laugh. Dan Yangzi and Daozi Lin Xian were here to block the gate and humiliate them. How would they automatically admit defeat by backing out of an awkward situation? It was obvious someone had defeated Daozi Lin Xian, and they had left after admitting defeat. The one that defeated Daozi Lin Xian is among us and had come down the mountain 1 step earlier than us. Ling Yushu's gaze flickered as he looked towards the crowd. Who could it be? In the Divine Arts Residence, there are 3 to 5 strongest individuals. Sword Maniac Xiao Yin, Mad Demon Tianfeng, and Mountain Carrier Strongman Yu Cho all have strong abilities and higher aptitude than others. There are also a few in royalties residents other than me. Seventh sister loves to play around and not hardworking. Even though her comprehension is great, there's no improvement if she doesn't put in any effort. Then there's also Crown Prince Min Yu. As for scholars residents, I've heard Chun Wanyun's abilities ain't bad as well. For sitting in the position of the big brother all along, he is also possible. Dan Yongzi and Daozi Lin Xian walked in a line and steadily moved out from the capital city. When they were 30 miles outside the capital city, they saw the torrential river as well as a young monk and an old monk traveling down on the water. Dan Yongzi and Daozi Lin Xian stopped and stood at the shore to bow to the two monks, senior brothers. The two monks also quickly stopped on the river surface and put their palms together to return the greeting. Senior brothers. The old monk's white eyebrows were drooping lowly as he said, "Did senior brothers return from Imperial College? Did you stay for 3 full days?" Dan Yongzi shook his head. "We didn't stay 3 full days." The old monk's eyebrows twitched, which was evident his inner heart was rather disturbed. Imperial College actually has such capability to face Daozi? I'll be going over with Fozi, and I wonder how would our circumstances be. Dan Yongzi bowed to bid farewell, and the old monk also bowed as they parted their ways. Dan Yongzi and Daozi Lin Xian's departure made the uppermost chancellors to the lowermost scholars of Imperial College let off a long sigh of relief. As for who had defeated Daozi Lin Xian, no one could determine it. Defeating Daozi Lin Xian was supposed to be a good deed, but it was very weird that the expert didn't jump out to claim that it was him or her who had defeated Daozi Lin Xian. Everyone started guessing, and some said that a prince must have secretly made his move and caused Daozi Lin Xian to back out after being defeated. However, due to the fighting openly and maneuvering covertly among the princes, this prince must have been worried of showing off his abilities. Therefore, he had concealed it so as to prevent other princes from assassinating him. There were also some who said that it was sword maniac Xiao Yin who had made a move. Xiao Yin was a sword maniac who indulged himself in the path of sword and had nothing else in his mind, holding no importance for fame. There were even some who said that it was those senior brothers who had graduated from Imperial College who had heard about this matter and rushed back to defeat Daozi Lin Xian before rushing back to the front lines. Many of the scholars who had graduated from Imperial College had already become generals in the front lines, leading the soldiers into battle. Some also guessed that it was Imperial Preceptor's disciples who had entered Imperial College on command to become Imperial scholars and defeated Lin Xian. They then quit school right after. There were all kinds of explanations. In scholars' residence, many scholars were unusually lively as they gathered in Chun Wanyun's courtyard, having a lively discussion with everyone talking at once. "Big brother, now the whole mountain is guessing who has defeated Daozi of Dao sect. Could it be you?" Chun Wanyun gave a yawn and tried to hold back his sleepiness. "It's not me." Even though I had the heart to stand out for Imperial College, however, I had gone too fierce with my training and fell asleep in the courtyard unknowingly. If not for your commotion, I wouldn't have woken up. I also have no idea who has defeated Daozi Lin Xian. Everyone was skeptical and Chu Ting smiled. "Could it be that Big Brother plans to modest about your fame and reputation?" Chun Wanyun was between laughter and tears as he said, "I haven't slept and took a break for 2 days straight to comprehend the 3 sword skills that Imperial Preceptor had taught us. Thus I had overused my brain and damaged my vitality. With me unable to even unleash 80% of my power, how could it be me? If I was the one who had defeated Daozi Lin Xian, would I have concealed it from all of you?" Suddenly Monk Yun Kei's spirit slightly stirred and asked, "It couldn't be that abandoned person, right?" Yu Qinghong's heart also slightly stirred. Even though she was embarrassed after getting smacked by Qin Mu into the copper pillar, she still extremely admired Qin Mu's abilities. That abandoned person has consummate skills, and no matter if they are battle techniques, spells, or sword skills, they are all not weak. Could it be him? Chun Wanyun hesitated for a moment and shook his head. "Truth to be told, I saw him training diligently and not sleeping. That's why I had motivated to train hard as well so as to defeat Daozi Lin Xian. His training time wasn't shorter than mine, so he must still be deep asleep right now, and missed the chance to fight Daozi Lin Xian." A scholar said angrily, "This guy making Big Brother go astray as well." When Imperial Preceptor was imparting his skills, he had made a commotion about refining Vital Chi Thread. Since he had just refined Vital Chi Thread, How could he have defeated Daozi of Dao sect? All the scholars nodded their heads in agreement and laughed. He had made a fool out of himself in front of Hall of Supreme Learning, and it made us feel good. Even the injuries from being beaten up by him don't hurt that much. At this moment, a commotion came from below the mountain and someone could be heard shouting, "They're an old monk that has come to the bottom of the mountain, and he brought along a young monk with him." They have then sat down in front of the mountain gate. All the scholars looked at each other, and Chan Wanyun's gaze flickered as he said solemnly, "The experts from Dao sect have just left, and the monks from Great Thunderclap Monastery have come. The younger one of these two monks must be the Fozi of Great Thunderclap Monastery. I couldn't fight Daozi Lin Xian, so I must definitely meet Fozi of Great Thunderclap Monastery. Junior brothers and sisters, I'll have to rest for half a day to preserve and nurture my spirit." All the scholars bid farewell and left. Chan Wanyun laid down with his clothes on and slept soon after. When the next day came, Chan Wanyun woke up and felt refreshed. He cleaned up, filled his stomach, and immediately went down the mountain. When he was down the mountain, only did he know that Fozi of Great Thunderclap Monastery had defeated many experts of Imperial College. This Fozi had realized Mahayana Sutra, Diamond Body, and was proficient in the victorious strife techniques of Buddhism. When he executed his spells, his body would expand several times and gain extraordinary strength. There was Buddha's aura flowing around his body, which would occasionally transform into a huge bell, and occasionally turned into a pagoda used for suppression. Holding on to the gold alms bowl with one hand, he could suck people into the bowl, and with the other hand Mount Meru would come crashing down. Chan Wanyun went forward to fight and had fought a dozen rounds, breaking his diamond body with drill sword form, hurting the Fozi Fo Xian. However, Fo Xian still had strong abilities after all and defeated him. Many scholars of Divine Arts Residence and Royalties Park sat up and took notice of him. The scholars of Scholars Residence were mostly 5 elements realm, and had a lower cultivation. For Chan Wanyun to actually clash with Fozi of Great Thunderclap Monastery a dozen times before losing, this accomplishment was considered a first-class experts in Divine Arts Residence and Royalties Park, being able to get into top 10. There were immediately princes and princesses of Royalties Park going forward with intention to rope him in. Chan Wanyun neither accepted nor rejected so as not to offend them too much. He thought to himself, "It seems like my accomplishment is pretty good, otherwise there wouldn't be people coming to rope me in. I wonder what would be the result if junior brother Qin exchange hands with this monk? How many moves can he withstand from Fozi? I've seen the green bull that young master mentioned a few times." In Imperial College, Hu Linger brought Qin Mu to the rear mountain and said, "There's a vegetable garden in the rear mountain. I was going for a walk and thinking of finding some spirit mushroom or immortal corolla. When I passed by that place, I saw a few spirit herbs in the vegetable garden, and met this bull which shouted at me a few times. I saw it guarding those spirit herbs, so I was in a very bad mood and wanted to eat it long ago." Qin Mu was astonished. In the vegetable garden? Must be a wild bull. Otherwise who would place it in a vegetable garden to eat the vegetables? That's true. Young master, how come the dragon Qilin in front of the gate wants to eat this bull? I've no idea. I reckon that this bull might have offended the dragon Qilin. Probably it pilfers vegetables from the vegetable garden, so the dragon Qilin isn't happy. Qin Mu guessed. Hu Linger brought him to the rear mountain, and there were lesser people at the rear mountain. Very little scholars came by here other than those couples coming on a date. On the rear mountain, there were a few courtyards which were said to be the residences of directorates who liked the shade. Other than the directorate's courtyards, the only residence left belonged to the mountain guarding elder. There were a few vegetable gardens opened up on the rear mountain. Qin Mu and Hu Linger followed the craggy pathway down the mountain, and after walking for a while, they saw a red-tiled courtyard, and the left area in front of the courtyard had been flattened, which was about 1/3 of a hectare. It was fenced up and many vegetables were planted. At this moment a green bull was standing in the vegetable garden, and eating the vegetables inside while swatting the mosquito leisurely with its tail. Qin Mu gave it a look and gave an uncontrollable shiver. This bull was really a green bull, and Qin Mu was also sure that there would only be one such bull even on the entire mountain. However, he might not be able to defeat this bull. The green bull had a body full of sinewed flesh and was incomparably majestic. It stood up on 2 legs like a human and was leaning on a pillar. Its front hooves, which had already become hard keratin palms, grabbed a handful of lush green vegetables. He was eating the vegetables leisurely. Qin measured with his gaze and estimated that this green bull was 2 to 3 times his height, and nearly had no extra meat on the bones. It was all muscles bulging, and the jade color of its green cowskin could actually reflect light, gleaming brightly like a beautiful jade that was polished for over 10 years. What's most terrifying was when this green bull breathed in and out. Its breath was like 2 white lights moving in and out. On top of that, with the dragon scales growing on its neck, Qin dared to confirm that this green bull had been cultivating on the mountain for many years, breathing in the qi of the 9 dragons. It caused the bull to be dragonized and grow dragon's scales. "Who is peeking at me?" Suddenly the green bull let out a human voice and stuffed a handful of tree peonies into its mouth. It sucked the white light at its nose back into its body, and its gaze was like lightning as it looked towards Qin before walking over. As it walked over, the bulging muscles bounced vivaciously. Qin let out a mouthful of murky breath and told Hu Linger, "Isn't it just a bull? I had herded cows since young, so how can't I handle it? Linger, fall back first. If I ask you to run later, you quickly run." "Understood." Hu Linger nodded her head and fell back. Qin took in a deep breath and walked towards the green bull with a smile. "This brother bull." That green bull had an explosive temper and rushed forward to beat him without any explanation while sneering. "Rascal with a crooked smile, you're definitely not a good guy. Don't call me your bull brother." Hu Linger quickly retreated up the mountain, and suddenly heard an astonishing rumble coming from the vegetable garden, which was followed by endless tremors. After a while, Qin frantically ran up like a wisp of smoke and shouted, "Linger, quickly run!" Hu Linger immediately lifted her legs and ran, glancing back secretly. She only saw Qin eye sockets had swollen up and his nose was badly bruised. It was evident that within a short while, the cowherd boy of disabled elderly village had been badly beaten by this green bull. Hu Linger secretly clicked her tongue in wonder as she thought to herself, "Young master is always brilliant, beating this and that after coming to Imperial College. How come he is getting beaten by a bull now?" Rumblings of hooves came from behind them, and it was obvious that the bull was chasing them aggressively, not letting them off. Qin quickly picked Hu Linger up and placed her on his shoulders, running desperately up the mountain. After a while, that green bull couldn't catch up them and turned back while cursing. When the green bull had come back to the vegetable garden, Chancellor Ba Shan's sleepy voice sounded from the red-tiled courtyard. "Why is it so noisy outside? Old master, there's someone bullying your bull." That green bull immediately bent over and smiled to the courtyard. "He even wanted to steal old master's vegetable and got chased off by me. Something like that actually happened?" Chancellor Ba Shan wore a gray-colored mink fur overcoat and walked out with a wine gourd that was half a human height in his hand. Raising his head to gulp a few mouthfuls of wine, he gave a burp and threw the wine gourd to the green bull and asked, "Who dared to steal from my vegetable garden?" "Pretty big guts, eh?" The green bull drank a few mouthfuls of wine from the gourd and gave a drunk hiccup, burping out the smell of herbs and wine. "No idea. It's a dim-witted looking foolish boy which brought a fox along." Chancellor Ba Shan looked like he was thinking and said, "So it's that boy from Great Ruins. He even dares to provoke my little bull and steal my vegetable. How wild and unbridled. I've got it. You shall stay here to look after my vegetable garden in case the vegetables get stolen again." Qin returned to the front of the mountain and touched the bruises on his face. His expression was ever varying. "This bull, I can't fight it, but I can instead drug it to knock it out. Grandpa Apothecary had said, if you can't win, use poison. I just need to tie up its hooves and it won't be able to retaliate. Patriarch, how come you're here?" In front of Qin was a straw hut with 2 to 3 rooms, which was very simple. This straw hut was beside a mountain and a river, which made it very elegant and calm. He could see the young patriarch sitting in the courtyard washing his bowls, which meant that he should have just been done with his meal. Beside him was a white-haired elder, who was used a loofah to scrub the pot. Qin had seen this elder before, and he was the elder of discipline for Heavenly Devil Cult. Even though the young patriarch might be the Empire's Grand Chancellor of Imperial College and had a distinguished position, he had no servants or servant girls to serve him and only had Elder of Discipline at his side. The young patriarch and Elder of Discipline saw him, and Hu Linger, but they didn't rise and continued with their chores. Elder of Discipline smiled. Patriarch lives here. Young cult master has never come here before. Qin Mu shook his head and stood outside to bow before walking in. Elder of Discipline greeted Qin Mu, and Qin Mu hurriedly returned his greeting before walking over to the basin to help the young patriarch to wash the bowls with a smile. Patriarch, being the Grand Chancellor, why are you living poorly? The young patriarch grabbed a towel to wipe his hands and said, I'm used to idling and can't stay in tall and majestic palaces. Elder of Discipline didn't live here before. I called him over, it's just that I'm getting old, implicating him to suffer with me. Qin Mu looked at Elder of Discipline and he gave a smile. I also want to have some peace for a few days as well. This place is just right. The young patriarch smiled. Young cult master, after you ascend, I'll still have to borrow Elder of Discipline for a few years and let him travel around with me. When I'm dead, it would be easier for him to collect my corpse. Our sacred cult leaves no corpse behind. Death is like an extinguished lamp and only ashes are left. When that time comes, Elder of Discipline would bring my ashes back. Qin Mu fell silent and felt a sourness in his heart. A hero past his prime. Even being as strong as village chief, as strong as the young patriarch, couldn't prevent being born, growing old, getting sick and dying. All their hot-bloodedness and strong heart would always be eroded by the passing time, turning them into corpses covered by the yellow soil. The young patriarch looked at him and said, An old monk and a young monk have come to the bottom of the mountain. Qin Mu nodded his head and used his vermilion bird vital qi to dry up the water on his hands after he was done with washing. Elder of Discipline hanged the wok after he was done and brought over a tea set as he planned to brew some tea. Hu Linger ran over to help. I know. I've heard that the monk below came from Great Thunderclap Monastery. I went to take a look at them and I recognized the old monk. I had seen him in Great Ruins before and heard Grandpa Ma say that he was his senior brother, and his name was Jing Ming or something. Qin Mu thought for a while and didn't dare to confirm if it was this name. As of the little monk, I haven't seen him before. I think he's the Fozi of Great Thunderclap Monastery. Hu Linger strenuously poured tea for them, though she was a little short and not as high as the teapoy. Elder of Discipline immediately took over the teapot and placed it on the tea set. He then carried the little fox and placed her on the rattan chair at the side with a smile. Let me do it. The young patriarch continued to stare at him and said, They are blocking the mountain gate of our Imperial College. Qin Mu replied, They have already blocked it half a day. I ran over to see the commotion, and the abilities of this Fozi are indeed powerful. Realize Mahayana Sutras, Victorious Strife Skills, Diamond Unbreakable Body, Realize Stupa, Mahayana Nirvana Mudra, 18 Arhats Mudra. Patriarch, did I have some misunderstanding to our Imperial College? The young patriarch was bewildered. What misunderstanding? Are we actually very weak? Qin Mu was puzzled. Why do we get beaten and why does our gate get blocked every day? Our gate has been blocked twice not long after I entered the school. If it was in my Great Ruins, we would have seized them and beat them up long ago. The young patriarch replied angrily, I'm not talking about this. What I meant is Fozi Fo Exine has arrived, so why didn't you go to meet him but went to the rear mountain instead? Qin Mu smiled. Who said I didn't go? I had gone over then came back from the mountain gate before going to the rear mountains. It was pretty bustling over at the mountain gate. The young patriarch flew into a fury and Elder of Discipline immediately served up the tea. Patriarch drank the tea in the cup in one mouth, and was ready to blow up after putting the cup down when Elder of Discipline hurriedly poured him another cup. The young patriarch suppressed his anger and said, The other scholars of Imperial College have already gone up to face the Fozi, so why aren't you going? Patriarch, I just beat the Daozi not long ago. Furthermore, I got injured. Qin Mu lamented. Daozi even stabbed a hole in my hand, you see. Where's the scar? Anyway, I'm hurting very serious internal injuries. Since I have fought around, let Fozi fight whoever he likes. I'm going to heal my injuries. Look, my face is still swollen. If you didn't even stand out for your young cult master who got beaten by a bull, why should I stand out for Imperial College? Elder of Discipline gave a cough and reminded, Patriarch, the tea has cooled. It doesn't cool this fast. The young patriarch slammed the table and sneered. So what do you want? To invite Imperial Preceptor over again to impart his experience? I have already invited him once. If I invite him again, where would I throw my old face to? Who else do you want me to invite? The Emperor. Qin Mu's heart leaped slightly and tried to sound out. Can the Emperor come to Imperial College to give a lecture? The young patriarch raised his head to drink the tea and even ate the tea leaves to quench his anger, laughing sarcastically. Drop your intentions, it's impossible for the Emperor to come to Imperial College to give a lecture. It's fine to profess devotion only when in trouble once, but to do it twice? I don't have such a big face. Qin Mu replied resentfully. Patriarch, Daozi of Dao Sect and Fozi of Great Thunderclap Monastery have already come to block the gate, so I'm thinking since 2 of the 3 biggest sects have arrived, should we Heavenly Saint Cult also show our face and block the gate of Imperial College as well? I as the young cult master should go forward to block the gate of Imperial College to strengthen our cult's might. The young patriarch slammed the table and suddenly rose up. The teapoy swayed from getting slammed while Elder of Discipline quickly blocked him and pacified. Patriarch, calm down, calm down. Young cult master is still a kid and there's no need to be angry at him. Calm down. The young patriarch laughed from extreme anger. Rascal, do you think there's no one in Imperial College who can defeat Fozi other than you? Qin Mu smiled. There should be, but that was in the past. Now these people have all graduated from Imperial College and no longer students of Imperial College. If Patriarch wants the paths and skills to flourish, you will have to invite the people who have left Imperial College to become high officials back and ask them to teach. You will also need to invite the first-ranking high officials of the Imperial Court over, asking them to teach their paths, skills, and divine arts. The young patriarch gave a sigh and shook his head. The current first-ranking officials are mostly existences like cult masters, sect leaders. Other than that, the rest are masters of their own aristocratic families. So how would they teach the secrets of their learning to all the people in the world? I understand what you mean, but I'm about to retire and have no mood to revitalize Imperial College. This will have to be handled by the next Grand Chancellor. It's just that I have no idea whom the Emperor and Imperial Preceptor would arrange to be this Grand Chancellor. Are you really not going to fight Fozi? Do you think you aren't a match for him? Qin Mu shook his head and was rather conceited. I'm the Overlord body, there's no difference between beating Daozi and Fozi to me. Overlord body? The young patriarch was bewildered and slightly at a loss. There's still something called Overlord body in this world? Elder of Discipline shook his head. I've not heard it before. Qin Mu was overflowing with confidence, and even the young patriarch was shocked seeing this kind of invincible conviction. With a tone that held disdain for the world, he said, Village Chief had personally said I was the one and only Overlord body, and only I could cultivate Overlord body 3 elixir technique. So it was that old fellow. He is still the more knowledgeable one. The young patriarch shot him a glance and asked, Are you really not going? Even if you don't go, I'll still have people who can force Fozi to retreat. Qin Mu blinked his eyes innocently and sounded out, Patriarch plans to disguise yourself as a youth to go forward? The young patriarch lifted his tea up and shouted, Quickly drink your tea and scram. Qin Mu drank his tea and brought Hu Linger to leave. However, he gave some thought and moved back again to ask, Patriarch, we can't keep getting our gate blocked by others. Why not we go and block other people's gates? Are you going to do it? Is the Emperor coming to give a lecture? Scram. Understood. This rascal. He won't even help out when there's no benefit. The young patriarch shook his head while Elder of Discipline smiled. Young cult master doesn't have much feelings to Imperial College, therefore, he wouldn't exert himself easily. Furthermore, ain't Patriarch feeling very happy as well? Patriarch laughed out loud and said, This brat loves to amuse me. As expected of the one that was taught by those old fellows. The old man of disabled elderly village is indeed extraordinary. I didn't even know there's such thing as an overlord body in this world, and he could even recognize it. When I retire from being the Grand Chancellor, let's go and find him to have a chat. However, young cult master is right, it isn't the way to keep getting blocked by others, so we might as well block other people's gates. Don't they want to rebel? We'll smack their faces off first and make them have no face to rebel. Elder of Discipline reminded him. Patriarch, you still have 2 months before you retire. The young patriarch sighed and replied, I can only let other people to handle this matter. The Emperor is already looking for the next Grand Chancellor. Who do you think will take up the post? Elder of Discipline shook his head and said, How would I know? However, I feel that the emperor would choose someone from the lower first-ranking high officials. Even though the empire's grand chancellor is only a third-ranking official, this position is too important and needs to be administered by the emperor's trusted aide. In the imperial palace, Emperor Yanfeng was reading through the memorials when a eunuch suddenly reported in a fine voice, "Your Majesty, Lord Gu has arrived. Let him in." Emperor Yanfeng didn't even lift his head. "I, your servant Gu Linwan, pay my respects to your Majesty." Emperor Yanfeng raised his head and looked at Gu Linwan, who was bowing in the hall. Placing his brush down, he said, "Lord Gu, you had been missing dozens of years ago and was rescued by little General Qin. Logically speaking, I should have assigned an official position to you. But it is not a minor guilt being missing for so many years and even losing the sword of the imperial court. You cannot get away with it. Even if I want to select you for promotion, I will feel even more pressure. However, I have still decided to stand my ground against the opinion of the masses and put you in an important position." Gu Linwan was surprised and delighted. The empire's Grand Chancellor of Imperial College is a position of utmost importance. Grand Chancellor will be retiring, and I have asked him to leave office 2 months later so that I can look for talents. I have found you and I hope you won't disappoint me. I will definitely offer my life in sacrifice and spare no effort in the performance of my duty till my dying day. Emperor Yanfeng raised his brush and continued to read through the memorials. "You don't need to offer your life in sacrifice. If you disappointed me, I would behead you. You may withdraw."